Happy New Year and welcome to my channel, my dear family. It's now 2024 and I've been thinking, why not look back at our channel's progress in 2023? In just 6 months, we've gained nearly 7,000 followers. These aren't just numbers to me, they represent 7,000 people who chose to subscribe, and that makes me incredibly happy. We've also reached over 1 million views on our videos. This channel has allowed me to receive amazing support that I never even dreamed of. Thank you all so much. From Jason. And now, let's take a look at some of the best stories from our channel's history. Hope you enjoy it. I was ready for the week to be over. Long meetings, sleepless nights, too many connecting flights, and an oppressive amount of jet lag, all added up to one thing. A very tired Kyle. Even when I was a young man, this kind of week would have been exhausting. But at 48, it was making me regret some life choices. Thank God I only had to travel like this occasionally, unlike the bad old days. When I opened the front door to my home, I'd been hoping to smell dinner all ready to go, and maybe to receive a welcoming kiss from Samantha, my wife of nearly 25 years. The former was commonplace, the latter only slightly less so. But I found neither awaiting me. Instead, the house was mostly dark, with the only light being in the entryway, along with a dim glow coming from the kitchen doorway. Sam. I called out her name as I hung my coat and arranged my luggage on the floor of the foyer. I'm in the kitchen. Her voice sounded strained, as if she was angry or had been crying. When I entered the kitchen and found her sitting at our small breakfast nook, I could clearly see that it was both. My wife's brown eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, but also filled with a furious light. Her normally immaculate chestnut hair was disheveled. Her ponytail and the strands that had escaped it put me in mind of a slowly fraying rope. All of this was indicative of the type of conversation we were about to have, but the final details cinched it. 2 manila envelopes on the table in front of her. Kyle, we need to talk. I was too tired to put up with any crap, but this would have to be handled sooner or later. Sliding into the chair opposite her, I wearily said, sure. What about? Samantha wordlessly pushed one of the envelopes over to me. Inside, I found a selection of photographs. Despite their poor quality, they told quite the story. Me dining with a gorgeous blonde woman little more than half my age, the two of us holding hands as we walked down the street, she and I locked in a passionate embrace in front of an apartment door, my hand sliding up under a curve-hugging red mini dress to cup her nearly bare ass. The timestamps printed on the photos, then jumped to the next morning, with us saying goodbye as I copped one last feel, squeezing her small, firm tit through the negligee she had worn to see me off. The last shot was of me looking a little regretful as I left, but it was clear that I was disappointed to be leaving, not guilty for what I had done inside. With a level, almost pleasant voice I inquired, where did you get these? What does that matter? There was no reciprocity in her tone, nothing even approaching congeniality. She was outraged, and I was mildly curious as to which made her most upset. That I had cheated, that my first response was to ask the source of her intel, or that I didn't seem at all perturbed. With a flick of the wrist, I tossed the evidence of my affair back onto the table. Well, mostly because they're not very good. Jenna looks way hotter in person, and she likes to leave the blinds part way open when we make love, any decent pie could have. What is wrong with you? There were tears mixed in with the rage now. I shrugged. I'm cost conscious. Sue me. Oh, wait, you were planning to, right? After all, I assume those are divorce papers in the other envelope. Sam was starting to sob. What the fuck, Kyle? Is this a fucking joke to you? I don't think this was the way she intended it to go. It's funny how people can have such different expectations, all based on what facts they do and don't have available to them. Oh, no, not at all. I'm sure it's tearing you up. It feels awful, I know. Leaning forward, I favored her with a particularly unpleasant grimace. It just about killed me back then. What? A small change in her tone, the wind hadn't gone out of her sails yet, but it was starting to shift. You know, when you cheated on me. Or at least when I found out about it. Samantha's face went slack for a moment, glistening streams of salt and water still dripping from it. A new hesitancy followed the sudden realization that what she knew, or even what she could prove, didn't matter. It had always been about what I knew. And I knew damn near everything. Well, everything that really mattered, anyways. My wife stuttered, I what, Sam? I didn't cheat. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry. Which eye were you going for there? Oh, I know, I should never have fucked Ronnie Perkins. Was it? You knew. Her tone was strangled, and I couldn't help but laugh. She sounded betrayed, even more than she had when I first sat down across from her. Stop laughing at me. You knew. Wiping a tear from my eye, I managed to downshift from laughter to a chuckle. Not at first. Not when you did it. Not for the 4 months you fucked him, not right after you stopped, not even for another year after that. I'd say you did a good job of hiding it, but you didn't. I just wasn't looking. Now it was my turn to sound betrayed, as my finger jabbed angrily at her. Because I trusted you. Because we agreed, we had always agreed that the most important thing in a marriage, above fidelity or trust or even love, was honesty. That you can't have any of those unless you always tell each other the truth about the big things, no matter how painful it might be. Sam looked away so quickly that my words might as well have been a slap. Shaking my head, I continued. But Matt was a freshman in high school when I found out, and Riley had just turned 12. I didn't want to ruin their lives. My laughter then went beyond self-deprecating straight into flat-out disgust. No, that's not quite right. God, it's gotten so easy to lie to you. I hate that. I hate that I can lie to my wife, and I hate that I can only do it so easily because I know how long she's lied to me. The truth is that I didn't want to be a part-time dad, and so I put up with knowing what I knew. I desperately hoped that maybe you'd eventually remember how important honesty was supposed to be in a marriage. Did you even realize how blatantly, openly unhappy I was there for a few months? Or did you even give a shit about me by then? She croaked, I did. I've always loved you. Fuck right off. It was said flatly and without effect. You don't do that to someone you love, or at least not someone you're in love with. Her eyes snapped back to me. I did. I really did. I made a mistake, okay? I was lonely, and he was charismatic and... Yeah. Oh, my husband is away all the time because he's got to work. Oh, I'm so lonely. Oh, it's so boring now that the kids are at school. Stop mocking me. I snorted. Oh, I'm sorry, was that too contemptuous? How unkind of me. I mean, it's not like you didn't treat me with contempt for a decade, but... I did not. She was trying to build a head of steam back up. Fuck it, let her rant. I knew who'd already won. Neither of us. But I'd have lost a lot less by the time all this was done. I made a mistake. Yes, I was lonely, and I was bored, and I was unhappy. I shouldn't have cheated, but it wasn't done out of contempt. Sam's shoulders sagged, the energy animating her seeming to have left once more. I was weak. I know that. I do, and I'm sorry. Seeing the sheet at least pause, and oh, how that disappointed me, how I wanted to fight after all these years and all her lies. I continued to lay out her failures, trying to draw my wife out of her worthlessly contrite self-pity. Let's put aside whether the cheating was contemptuous. I say it was, and I'm the wrong party. With a broad smile, I waved my hand at the photos of my young lover. Well, I was then. Maybe not so much now. But what about hiding it from me? Not letting me decide what I wanted to do after you cheated on me. Are you saying that was treating me with respect? Really? Sam was breathing heavily, whether from fear, anger, or panic, I wasn't sure. It wasn't meant to be disrespectful or even dishonest. I loved you. Please, I did. It wasn't, I had already fucked up. I didn't want to make it worse and hurt you more. I was never going to do it again, and I did everything I could to make it up to you. Except treat me like a fucking adult. Or even, I laughed. No, not even like an adult. Just like another person. Like a real human being, someone you respected enough to. I drummed my fingers on the table. Do you remember when Riley broke that vase? She was, what, 6? 5. Sam rubbed her arm while looking away. She knew where this was going and didn't like it. Right. 5. And then she tried to hide it from us. What does she get in the most trouble for? Hiding it, right? And you know what? She wailed and cried and said that wasn't fair, but you told her that good people admit to their mistakes, regardless of the consequences to themselves. That's not the same. Stepping right on top of my wife's words, batting aside her defense, I continued, and do you remember how proud we were of her after she got into that fender bender when she was 16? Riley had all sorts of outs on that one. It was dark, the streets had been slick, someone could have had their brights on. There were 100 lies she could have told us and gotten away with it. But no, our daughter remembered the lesson that you taught her and admitted that she'd gotten distracted by her phone. She took her punishment without complaint. I was so proud of her, that she had learned the lessons you taught her. That she did the right thing. I leaned forward over the table again, pointing accusingly. But you couldn't do it. You couldn't be even as responsible or as honest as a 16-year-old girl. It was different. It wouldn't have been just me facing the consequences. You would have been hurt, and then the kids could have gotten caught up in it if we couldn't, she sighed. If you couldn't forgive me. I guess we'll never know. But here are some things I do know. I began to tick them off on my fingers. 1. You say you were bored. But you were the one that wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, even after the kids were in school. That was on you. You agreed to that. Only because you wanted to. I would have been fine with, no, happy with you going back to work. We could have used the money, and I could have cut back at my job. I could have been home. Which leads to point 2. You were lonely. Join the fucking club. You had the kids, and you had your friends. Hell, your family lived nearby. When I was on the road, I was alone all the damn time. I was so desperately lonely that I wanted to cry some nights. But I still didn't fuck anyone else. I was loyal, and I was faithful. And, on top of that, I was only on the road because of point 1. You didn't want to work. That's not. Shut up. I'm not done. I've waited 8 fucking years to say my piece, you cheating whore, and you're goddamned well going to listen. Sam flinched. I'd never called her names before, and rarely raised my voice to anyone. Point 3. Unhappy. You were fucking unhappy. I was working back-breaking hours, my wife was pulling away from me, I barely got to see my kids, and none of that was my choice. I needed to support my family, because I was the only one that was going to. All of this, is on you wanting to be Susie fucking homemaker. All of it. Samantha looked at the table. I know that. I was selfish. I should have realized it was hurting you as much as it was me. More, even. But I was tunnel-visioned. Listening to the wrong people. That worthless bitch Jeannie, right? Sam's idiot friend had been with her since high school. Thrice divorced. All of them somehow not her fault, even though she cheated on at least 2 of them. Always claimed she'd only ever cheated after everything had fallen apart. Sam never wanted to hear how unlikely that was, though, at least not until Jeannie disappeared from our life shortly after my wife's affair. Sam nodded unhappily. I met Ronnie through her. She had been seeing him after her last divorce, and said he was great. A good listener. That's all she said I needed, another person to listen to me, a male opinion on things. I only planned to talk with him. Clearly. It's true. My wife's voice was small. Weak. Like her. All we did was talk at first. But he convinced me that she swallowed. You know what I did, it sounds like. I don't want to go into it. I did know. Not all of the details, but enough that I felt no need to rehash it at that table. Not yet, at least. I'd had most of a decade to plan for some sort of confrontation, and while there were certain variables I couldn't account for, I now knew the general direction we were headed. Yeah. I know what you did. I looked away from her. I just don't know why. She quietly said, I told you why. No, you told me what you did, or at least enough of it. You told me how you felt, what led you to that point. But I don't understand. I hadn't cried over her affair in a long time, but I suddenly felt a lump in my throat. I don't understand why you didn't come to me. Talk to me. If you had been honest, if you had. Even though the weight of the secret I'd borne had finally been lifted, my shoulders slumped. Such a goddamned waste. I loved you so much, I would have, I don't know. Tried to figure it out. Gone to counseling with you. And after a sidelong glance told me Sam was watching me intently. If you had told me, I can't promise I would have been able to forgive. To get through it. But I would have tried. I still loved you then. The tears fell from her eyes once more. Then. Not now. I nodded. She hissed, fuck you. Excuse me. There was so much pain in her features, so much rage and anguish in the look she gave me. You cheated too. You lied too. The fatigue was pressing down on me, but the fight wasn't over. With a quick crack of my neck, I pulled myself back up straight. I could go a few more rounds, I owed us both that much. Not until after you did. Sam came out swinging. And that excuses it, you could have come to me, too. You knew I'd done it, but you didn't say anything, just went off and banged that blonde bitch. The quick verbal counterpunch halted her flurry. She wasn't the first. What? She wasn't the first. Not even the 10th. Sam didn't speak, just stared at me, mouth uselessly flapping. I hadn't landed a knockout, but she was staggering. I stood and moved to the fridge, then looked over at her. Beer. No response. The caps came off of 2 bottles, and I put one down in front of her, then took a long pull off the other. I found out a little over a year after you cheated. Well, after you ended the affair, anyways, so I guess about a year and a half after you broke your vows to me. Do you remember when we wanted to give your old iPad to Riley? A small nod, finally, one that belied the sickening realization that must have been creeping up on her. You hadn't used it in a while, so it was a good starter tablet for her. But it needed to be cleaned off first. I chuckled as understanding bloomed on her face, followed quickly by horror. Thank God I did that, for all our sakes. I didn't need her learning sex ed from your emails. That's when I found out. I had taken the tablet with me when I traveled. It made sense for me to deal with it. You've never been very tech savvy, have you? You didn't know that the emails and the messages would stay on the tablet, even after you'd erased them from your phone, unless you put the tablet back online after you did it. I had bought you a new one for our anniversary, remember? She dully nodded once more. So, yeah, there were all your emails to him and to Jeannie, and I shook my head. I had at least the outline of the affair. When it started, when it ended, why it ended, all of that. And, once I synced the tablet with your account again, after I saved all of those incriminating messages off someplace safe, Sam wins. I saw that you deleted the evidence of your affair. Didn't see any new ones, either, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. You could have just gotten smarter. You cheated once, why wouldn't you cheat again? Or maybe you had done it before. Maybe Ronnie wasn't the first one to cuckold me. It was the only time. Her voice was muted. Was it pain for herself or for me? For knowing how long I'd lived with the knowledge of what she'd done. I wanted to think it was more the latter, but the most recent evidence told me it was more the former. Or maybe it was a mix of both. I didn't think Sam was truly evil, just weak, spoiled, and dishonest. I know that now. By the time I sighed. By the time I found out, we were doing better financially. Not so good that I could hire a detective then, but enough that I could be home a bit more often if I chose. I was going to surprise you with that after the trip where I found out. I looked away. But once I learned what you'd done, that was the last thing I wanted. I'd gotten used to not being around the kids by then. I hated that, but I had. And I knew that I wanted as little to do with you as possible, so I was able to prioritize them when I was home. I pursed my lips, trying to fight the lump forming in my throat again. I was a mess pretty much that whole trip. Anytime I wasn't working, I was either crying or drinking. Or drinking and crying. It's a miracle I didn't lose those clients. A sneer appeared. But hell, I traveled more than just about anyone else on my team. I was the best fucking salesman there. And all it cost me was my marriage. Didn't have to, but that's what you wanted. I didn't want it. She angrily sobbed. I wanted you home. I wanted you with us, with me. But not enough to do anything productive about it. Not enough to tell me how unhappy you were, that you were so miserable you were willing to spread your legs for the first sympathetic ear with a dick attached to it. Not enough to get a job yourself. She started to speak, but I waved her words away. It doesn't matter. What happened happened. You can't fix it, and I don't want to hear your excuses. This is about me now, Sam. What I did. What I did, because of what you did. You fucked another man. Not once, not as a drunken mistake. No, from what I can tell, you fucked him at least 30 times in 4 months. Wait, no. That was the number of times you were with him. I have no idea how many times you two actually fucked. 50. 100. More. I shook my head. Doesn't matter. You did it willingly, and you did it repeatedly. I knew I couldn't be around you any more than I had to. That's why there was a sudden flurry of trips there for a bit, when I had been trying to get out of them before. Remember that? Oh, just a little bit more, and then I'll be able to be home more often. It was true, in its way. Not because it was going to secure my position, I'd already done that. It was so that I could have time to plan and then, for a while, to stomach being around you. The condensation from my beer was making a ring on the table. I probably should have used a coaster, but I couldn't give a fuck what happened to it. Not like it was going to be mine anymore. First, I tried to figure out if there was some way I could stay with you, some way I could approach you with the evidence, but I couldn't see a way to. You had lied to me all that time, and getting you to confess wasn't the same thing as you confessing on your own. So then I thought about divorce. I gestured at the unopened envelope. Just like you did. I think it took me longer than you, though. I wonder why that is. Shaking my head again, I continued. Regardless, I looked into it, and the best case scenario was me living in a shitty little apartment, seeing the kids every other weekend, and giving you money to go fuck whoever you wanted. I'm not a slut. I made a mistake. Samantha finally found her voice. She needn't have bothered. I was going to tell my story now. I'd already known hers for longer than I'd liked. She'd finally get to hear mine. I don't care. That shut her up again. Whether you were a slut or not, as soon as you were single, you'd have needed to get a job to supplement your income, and within, what, 6 months? A year, tops, you would have found a new guy, probably where you worked. You're still attractive now, but you were beautiful then. So I'd pay a bunch of money to not see my kids, finance you fucking another guy, and be miserable by myself. That was a no-go. We've already established you don't know shit about electronics. I took a look at the cloud backups for your devices. I'd set them up for you, and I doubt you even knew they existed. I didn't find any evidence of an earlier or later affair. Then, it was trivial to get keyloggers and trackers on all of your shit. Hell, I don't think you even know how to turn off Find My Phone. And, as far as I could tell, you never cheated on me again. Of course I didn't. I felt so guilty about it. I rolled my eyes. And how would I know that? For fuck's sake, Sam, I even had the kids tested to see if they were even mine. They look so much like you that I couldn't even be sure of that, once I knew you cheated. The mother of my children looked appalled and outraged. That made me feel good. Not so much because I wanted her to feel bad, although, in the moment, that certainly was a nice benefit, but because her reaction seemed genuine. That look told me that she'd loved me once. That kind of pain, the understanding that someone you love could think such horrible things about you, is hard to fake. Do you get it now? Do you get how badly you hurt me? I know that you think you understand how badly it hurts, with your fist full of pictures, but you don't have the first fucking clue. I was stuck with a woman who had cheated on me, who lied to me, who I no longer trusted. My life was tied to hers, at least if I wanted to live a good one. And I was going to have to hide my anger and my outrage and my sorrow. I was boxed in. I had to lie to everyone because of what you did. And the worst part, I still loved you. If I didn't, it would have been easy. I could have treated you like that one manager I detested or some other irritant that I needed to put up with. But I had to choke down my anger and find a way to go on knowing the woman I loved more than anyone else in the world had stabbed me in the back. So that's what I did. I found a way to cope. She sneered, by fucking other women. You goddamned hypocrite. Not at first, no. My bottle was empty. I considered getting another beer, but I knew I'd probably be driving soon and settled for a soda instead. Sam hadn't touched hers. At first, I tried to find ways to channel my rage into productive things. My sales went up. I thought of every extra dollar I earned as a chance of freedom from you. But at night, I was still alone with my thoughts. Drinking wasn't a long-term solution. But you know what nearly every hotel has? A gym. Sam's eyebrows knit together. Is that why you got in shape? I thought you wanted to. Yeah, I know what you thought. I told you a lot of bullshit. I sighed. Okay, not all of it was. I did want to be in better shape so I could keep up with the kids. But mostly I needed something to do with my anger. And I had a lot of anger. I'm sorry. I wish I'd known that. Samantha reached for my hand, her expression compassionate. I recoiled from my wife's touch as if it were a snake. The time for loving reconciliation was past. She made sure of that. Don't. Sam's hand hovered over the tabletop, weighing whether she should press on. Something in my eyes or my body language told her what a bad idea that would be. I'd never have hurt her, but I sure as hell would have gotten up and walked out. As my wife folded her arms around herself in a hug, I continued my story. No, I didn't set out to cheat on you. It didn't even occur to me until maybe 5-6 months later. I wasn't traveling as much then, you remember. But I was still so unhappy. It was on one of those later trips I spent the first night with another woman since you and I married. You cheated. Call it what it is. I didn't cheat. Cheating would indicate that I'd broken the rules of our marriage. I tipped the neck of my soda bottle at her. You'd already done that. You cheated. You'd lied to me. You'd hidden things. As far as I was concerned, that meant there were no longer rules I had to obey, either. Bullshit. I don't care what you think. I did what I had to stay sane, to stay with my kids, and to try to claw back some small measure of self-respect that you and that fuckboy stole from me. A deep breath in and out through my nose. But hell, this is probably the last real conversation we're going to have, so I'll play along. If our roles were reversed, if I had cheated, if I had lied, if I had hidden things, and, key here, if you knew, but revealing that you knew meant that you'd have to live in poverty without the kids, what would you have done? Would you have felt even slightly guilty if you got a chance to turn the tables? She opened her mouth to speak. Don't even try to fucking lie to me anymore. You didn't even feel guilty enough to confess what you did. Shit, you didn't even try to make my life easier by offering to get a job after you cheated. Half the emails between you and Jeannie before you cut her off were about how to make sure you didn't get divorced, so you didn't lose the cushy life with me. No. How I didn't lose you. Not the life we had, not the house, but you and the kids. I regarded her coolly. Even now, she couldn't be honest. Whether with me or herself or both, I'd never know. Whatever you need to tell yourself to get through the day. Another sip to marshal my thoughts. Anyways, the first woman. I'm not going to mention names if I don't have to, you know Jenna, but I don't want you going off on some misguided attempt to fuck up other people's lives. The first one, we'll call her Anna, was someone I worked with at another office. She had been cheated on by her husband, so I confided in her. And on one trip, I did more than confide in her. She suggested I needed a sportfic to get my masculine mojo back. Or, you know, whatever. She was right too. After that first time, I felt guilty, but not as much as maybe I should have. Was that what it was like for you, too? Never mind. Rhetorical question. Anna and I spent a few more nights together that week, but neither of us wanted it to turn into something serious. She was newly divorced, and the whole point of it for me was to deal with things well enough to stay with you until the kids were grown. We parted ways, occasionally hooked up again later when the mood struck, but mostly just stayed friends. And then I was able to come home to you. Really come home. I still detested what you'd done, but now I had my own secrets and my own lies. A wry grin for my also duplicitous spouse. It's exhilarating, isn't it? Knowing something your better half doesn't. I never looked at it like that. It was always. I started to quote a particularly memorable email. Ronnie, I feel so dirty keeping it from Kyle. It makes me so hot. I love him, but stop it. I didn't, I already said it was a mistake. She sighed. I didn't feel that way afterwards. I felt just dirty. Actually dirty. Not hot. Guilty. But not guilty enough, yeah. Not enough to actually come clean. You had your affair, and it was great and hot, and the only reason you ended it was not because you felt guilty, but because he got too demanding. And even now, you're trying to trickle truth me. I chuckled. But that's you all over, isn't it? I've slept with 12 women, I've kept an affair going for 2 years, and I still treated you and our family with more respect than you treated me. Her mouth hung open, then she croaked, 2 years. Man, her pie sucked. Until recently, I did everything I could to keep them hidden from you. They were all out of town, all short term. Always used a condom, unlike you and that asshole. Never took time away from you or our family. You can't claim that, can you? You postponed our anniversary dinner. One time, you were so late to pick the kids up from their after-school program that they called me while I was out of town. And later, I found out in each case, it was so you could fuck your boyfriend. And then I looked at our finances from back then, and found out you were pulling out cash occasionally. Why was that, Sam? Why were you doing that when I was killing myself to provide for us? She was silent. Sullen. That's what I thought. I snatched up the other envelope. Sam tried to stop me but was too slow. Don't. She looked away as I leafed through the pages, hiding her head in the sand once again, hoping the issue would go away if she just didn't acknowledge it. Jesus, Sam. You must have really hated me. This is wow, 70/30ths. You get the house. That much alimony. Shoot for the stars, I guess. You've been cheating on me with that bitch for 2 years. I shrugged. You didn't know that. The thick sheaf landed on the table with a thud. You're not going to get anything like this much. I have evidence of your affair, too. Better evidence than you have, for that matter. What have you really got? Some pictures that imply sex without confirming it. And this is a no-fault state anyways. It hurt so bad when I found out about her. What you did. I wanted to hurt you, too. Yeah, I get that. She bowed her head. I wanted to do the same at first. I did lash out here and there over the years. I told Ronnie's wife what he and you had done, for example. He was a serial cheater. Abuser, too. God, I hadn't smoked in years, but I wished I had a cigarette for this. That's why he's dead now. What? Sam's eyes went wide, and her expression was tinged with fear. Relax. I didn't kill him. You're not worth going to jail for. He had a heart attack, according to his wife, while fucking yet another married woman. Strange that someone so young would die like that, especially since his wife was a nurse. But then, maybe that's precisely why he did die so young. Drug contraindications are a bitch. I didn't ask the former Mrs. Jenkins, though. We were too busy engaging in other activities. She looked at me with horror once more, but I merely smiled sweetly and took a drink. Anyways, eventually, all I wanted was for you to tell me the truth. I wanted to believe that you were still the same person that had taught our daughter about honesty. I wanted you to be the woman that I'd fallen in love with. I did my best to be loving to you, to be warm. Do you remember? I was still hurting, but I tried to put it aside. Tried to understand from your emails why you did what you did. And once I was able to deal with the hurt in my own way, I tried to find a way back to us. I gave you so many opportunities to confess, so many chances to come clean. Do you remember when we were in bed that one night after what were their names? That one celeb couple that broke up because one of them cheated. And I told you that if you ever cheated on me, that I'd prefer to find out from you than any other way. I could see you mulling it over, and then you told me. Her voice was hollow. I'd never cheat on you, because I love you too much. Yeah. I looked away. When I traveled next, that was the second time I cheated. She didn't retort. Didn't scream, so you're saying it's my fault. It was clear. That was exactly what I was saying. She cheated, and she lied, and she betrayed not just me, but the core value we both had claimed was the most important in a marriage. Every time I'd given her a chance to, prompted her to, all but begged her to, she just dug herself in deeper. And I'd go and cheat afterwards. It was a stupid, self-destructive coping mechanism, but it was the one I had. I tapped the envelope that contained the pictures. This was your last chance. I didn't suddenly turn stupid, Jenna, and I could have hidden this from you indefinitely. I wanted you to find out. I hoped a tear slid down my cheek. I guess I wasn't entirely done crying about the destruction of our marriage. I hoped that you'd find out, and you'd confront me, but that you'd confess what you'd done. Try to find a way back with me. Then I tapped the other envelope. But when I saw this, I knew we were over. I tried so hard to stay in love with you, right until I saw this envelope. I knew then that either you never were the woman I thought I'd married, or you changed somewhere along the way. Either way, that woman was gone, and she was never coming back. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Samantha didn't say anything. She couldn't deny it. She'd not only gotten documents drawn up, but they would have been ruinous if any judge wouldn't have simply laughed them out of court. And when she was confronted, she still lied. Lying had become second nature to her, to me, too, I suppose. I lied to myself about who my wife was right until the end. Sam watched me as I stood. I'll be back to get some more of my stuff later. My lawyer will be in touch. The settlement will be fair. I don't want to put you in the poorhouse, Sam. You were a good wife for 15 years, and you're still a great mom. I don't hate you anymore. I did for a while, but I sighed. Now, I'm just sad. She nodded, unspeaking. Leaning over, I kissed the top of her head one last time. Goodbye, beautiful. I wish things could have been different. And then I was gone, with the sound of sobs trailing behind me, as I closed the door to what had once been my home. After that, I just drove for a while. I knew where I was going, but I needed to be by myself for a little while first. I needed to grieve by myself. Eventually, though, I rang the woman who I'd always been able to rely on. It was funny, our relationship had started out so innocently, with me mentoring Jenna 4 years before. She was just barely out of college, with an MBA, so knew the ink was still wet and ambition that would put the captains of industry to shame. We met at a networking event, and I could easily see she was going places. I didn't view her in a sexual way at first, well, no more than I would any other young, beautiful woman. Less, perhaps, I liked our friendship as just that. Friendship. Jenna was grateful for my guidance, and I was proud of her accomplishments. We eventually became close enough that I confided in her one night when we were having dinner. She had wanted to talk to me about a new contract she was looking at, but I was distracted. Sam had once again failed to confess when given an easy out, and I was brooding. When I told Jenna my story, she listened and consoled me. It felt good to have someone I could share the secret with. The secret and more. I had never had an emotional affair before. The closest had been the first one, the one I'd called Anna when speaking about her to Sam, but even that fell short. She offered a friendly shoulder to cry on sometimes and a very willing sexual partner at others. There was no serious emotional involvement there. Jenna was different. We had been friends for a while, for one. Lived in the same town as me, too. She and I could and did meet up more frequently, but I only ever meant to be friends with her, never sexual partners. That changed after her fiancé left her. We didn't become intimate then, but after she'd healed for a few months, Jenna and I shared a few drinks and then a bed. We turned out to be compatible in just about every way. Regardless, I still had one child living at home then, and I hadn't entirely given up hope that Sam might confess after it was just the two of us living in an empty nest. Beyond that, Jenna was young enough that leaving my wife for her would certainly cause tongues to wag. So we just kept it casual. We were something more than friends, something less than full-time lovers. I obviously wasn't exclusive with her, and I didn't expect her to be with me. We simply agreed that she would let me know if she was otherwise occupied. No details were necessary. I was certain that she would find a young man to marry before too long. But Jenna never did. Instead, we continued our arrangement, and when it became clear that there was only one chance of Samantha confessing, by making my infidelities so blatant that a blind woman could see them, Jenna was entirely on board with her role in my scheme. Hell, she did just about everything she could to make it clear that we were engaged in an affair, short of pinning her soiled panties to Sam's pillow with a note saying, "I'm fucking your husband." Remembering her threat to do just that brought a smile to my face. Hell, Jenna brought a smile to my face in general. I doubted that our affair would end simply because it had ceased to be adulterous, but eventually some guy her age was going to snap her up. She deserved that kind of happiness, but in the meantime I was going to enjoy her company as much as I could. She picked up on the third ring. Jenna's apartment, home-wrecking Trump speaking. I snorted. Mission accomplished there. She found out. Really? Fucking amazing. Only took her 6 months. Quietly, I said, she was waiting for me with divorce papers. Her tone had changed from playful to sympathetic. "Oh, Kyle, babe. How are you?" "Ah, kind of shit, actually. Are you busy tonight?" "No, not at all. Come over." "Thanks." When I showed up at her front door, suitcases in hand, Jenna pulled me into a big hug, then led me inside and held my hands while I told her everything that transpired. When I was finished, she said, "I'm so sorry, babe. I mean," she sighed. "I'm sorry that she hurt you, and that she couldn't just tell you the truth. But look, I'm going to be honest, okay? I'm glad you're divorcing her." Yeah. Jenna kissed me, a gentle, sweet kiss. "I'm glad it's settled. Now you know." And she bit her lip. "Now you're free to, move on." Her hand stroked my cheek. Maybe with me." "What? Seriously? Jenna, I'm almost twice your age and..." Another kiss, a more forceful one. "But you're not twice my age." "Not quite. Older. Yeah. But I'm a grown woman, Kyle. And I know what I want and who I want." I scoffed. "Jenna, come on. I know you've got young guys queuing up too. I haven't seen anyone besides you in almost a year, Kyle. I haven't needed anyone else, or wanted them, for that matter." She straddled me suddenly, her firm body pressed against mine. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight, babe. Take whatever time you need. I've been waiting for you for a year. I'll wait longer if I have to." Looking up into those gorgeous blue eyes, I couldn't help but ask, "Why didn't you say something?" Her lips brushed against mine. "Because I didn't want to make you decide between me and her. You've been trying to get her to admit the truth for years. I was pretty sure she wasn't going to, so I decided to wait. If she did miraculously confess, I didn't want you to feel guilty about me. And if she didn't," she kissed my neck, and I felt myself begin to stir. With a chuckle, she said, "Well, I figured I'd get first crack at you." "Jenna, SHH, baby. I'm in no hurry. I'm happy with how we are now. I want more, but we can move as fast or as slow as you want. I'll be here, okay?" She pulled back to gaze into my eyes once more. "I'll be yours when you're ready. As long as you'll be mine, too." I opened my mouth to object again. But then I thought, why am I fighting this? Jenna was great. Yeah, there was the age difference, but she wasn't some kid straight out of college. She was closer to 30 than 25. And she and I were more in sync, in terms of personality, goals, and attitudes than Sam and I ever had been. As I studied Jenna's face, I found myself looking at her anew, not as my mentee, or my friend, or my lover, but as all those things and more. She hadn't explicitly said the L word, but in all of her actions, in all of the long conversations and rushed lunches and evenings spent with her both in bed and out, love was there. I thought of all of the times we spent together and of all the time I wished I hadn't wasted trying to save a dead marriage. This was the beginning of my second act, and Jenna would be my leading lady. I want that, too. Her eyes lit up. Really, a kiss answered her query, a long, slow kiss between two lovers that might become something more permanent. That would, when the time was right, after all the wreckage was cleared. But then the kiss morphed into something more familiar, a passionate embrace between two people who knew each other's bodies intimately, but never tired of exploring them. Jenna disengaged long enough to stand and take my hand, eagerly leading me to her bedroom. Our bedroom. We'd have to talk about that eventually. I hadn't been with her in weeks, and we both keenly felt our shared pent-up desire. More than that, though, we needed to reaffirm everything that we just said, and nothing would slow us down in doing so. By the time we were done undressing each other, our clothes were absolutely demolished, with buttons popped off and seams torn. Neither of us cared. I love you, Jenna. She trembled and gasped as I held her close, once again watching her as she watched me. Her head turned towards me, and tears trickled onto the pillow. Did you mean it? Really? Yes, Jenna. Yes, I did. I don't know, I sighed. I don't know what's going to happen next, with me, my life, my kids, hell, even where I'm going to be living. Here. I vote here. But whatever does happen, I want you by my side. You've already been there, and I need to honor that. To be honest about what it's meant to me, what it means to me. What you mean to me. I kissed her softly. I love you, Jenna. That's the honest truth. We lay together for a while, comfortable in the warmth of each other's embrace. In other circumstances, perhaps we would have stayed that way. Her bedroom did become our bedroom, at least for a few weeks. Eventually, we both agreed that it made more sense for us to live separately until things were sorted. Jenna and I were still in each other's beds almost every night, but having separate addresses until the messiest parts of the divorce were done was the smartest choice. And, my oh my, were there a lot of messy parts. First, the kids. They were not thrilled at all with either Sam or myself. Their mom had talked to them first, and while she didn't completely blame me for the split, she was, let's say, selective with the information she provided. I got an earful from both Matt and Riley. But my kids calmed down a bit, towards me, at least, when I gave them all the necessary context, albeit each for different reasons. Matt had a kid on the way, and he understood why I stayed as long as I did, especially once I explained what the fallout would have been. When he learned that divorce would have meant almost never seeing him or Riley, along with how close we were to poverty even without trying to keep up two households, he started to understand. And when I explained to him the impotent rage and crushing sadness my grudging acceptance had engendered, he became even more sympathetic. Matt still wasn't happy, but he was accepting. Riley was flat out pissed once she learned the truth. She had really taken the lessons about honesty and accountability that we tried to impart to heart, and finding out everything her mom had done turned her against Samantha in a big way. That wasn't what I intended. I didn't want their relationships with either of us harmed, if only for the kids' benefit, but it sure beat having her mad at me. She still was, to an extent, but my daughter placed the bulk of the blame for our divorce squarely on my wife's shoulders. Next was the divorce itself. When the division of assets started, it seemed like things would be amicable, but that didn't last long. Sam fought to keep the house. I offered to have her buy me out, but she couldn't afford that. After she let that go, Samantha argued for more alimony. And then the disputes were about division of property. Retirement. On and on it went. She wasted so much money on our lawyers and still got basically the same split that I had originally offered. Now, though, her cut was going to be smaller, because the whole pie was smaller. Jenna's place in my life proved to be less of an issue than I had expected. Neither Matt nor Riley were happy that I was with someone not much older than them, but that wasn't the main bone of contention. Their mom had tried to convince them early on that Jenna stole me from my wife. Even after I convinced them that wasn't true, it stuck around on a subconscious level. It wasn't until our wedding, and especially the fact that we had an ironclad prenup, at Jenna's insistence, that they finally accepted her as my partner. Yes, our wedding. Once the division of assets was done, almost a fucking year later, thanks to my ex-wife's desperate attempts to keep a lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to, I bought a smaller house, and Jenna moved in with me. It was bliss. It honestly never really stopped being bliss, and within a year we were married. Oh, like any couple, we had our issues. Some of them were the standard ones, like division of chores between two hardworking people that were very tired at the end of the day. Some were unique to a relationship with a significant age gap. But, when it came down to it, we were committed to each other and to our future. and to our kids. Jenna was originally the one that wanted kids. My wife could be quite persuasive when she wanted to be. She was in her early 30s, and I was in my early 50s, but she argued that I was as healthy as a horse. I had to admit, after playing with my grandchildren, I found myself missing the pitter-patter of little feet around the house. Jenna went off the pill a few years after we were married. I got the snip after Dylan and so were born. Twins. Yeah, we didn't sleep much for a while. It was kind of surreal to see my grandchildren and my two youngest children grow up together. I did wish I was able to be just a little bit more active for them. Healthy is one thing, young is another. But we were a happy family, and that's what mattered most. Samantha was surprisingly sanguine the first time we found ourselves together at an event after I married Jenna. It was Riley's wedding, our daughter was marrying a great guy, and we were both pleased as punch with her fiancé. Sam had finally accepted her role in the failure of our marriage, and with the passage of time, our feelings towards each other were mostly fondness for the people we'd been when we were younger, and appreciation for each other as parents. We even danced together while Jenna chatted with my ex-wife State. Sam smiled up at me. "You seem really happy, Kyle." "I am. Very much so." A hint of sadness made its way into her eyes. "Happier than you were with me." It wasn't a question. A sympathetic smile was all I had to cushion the blow. By the end, yeah. I really messed everything up, didn't I? We both made mistakes, Sam. I could have handled things better, too. I was so stuck on you confessing on your own. Maybe if I shook my head. I don't know. It doesn't matter now. No, I suppose not. But still, she wiped away a solitary tear. I'm glad we had the time together that we did. I'll always cherish it. I will, too. And we have some great kids, too. Samantha's grin was broad and brilliant. For just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd loved so much. That woman, the young wife and mother that I'd adored, would always have a little piece of my heart. Yeah, we do. We really do. The music ended. My first real love stood on tiptoe and kissed my cheek, then walked arm in arm with me back to my greatest love. As I took Jenna's hand to lead her to the dance floor, my ex-wife said, "I'm very happy for you both." She might have been telling the truth, she might not. It didn't matter, because as my wife and I danced a slow dance, staring into each other's eyes, I could honestly say that I had never been happier. I found out in the most unusual way. It happened at the start of our annual men's fishing weekend. The guys, Scott, Stan, Roger, and myself, go up to the lake for our 3-day fishing trip, while our wives make it a girls' weekend. We've known each other for many years, and Roger and Mary were our closest friends. Stan Fortunato was Roger's nephew and several years younger than us, but we welcomed him into our circle of friends. Over time, he became one of my best employees. When Laura and I got married, we were just high school graduates, but I was determined and hardworking. Shortly after graduating, I started a small pool service business, and within 2 years, it had grown to serve over 100 homes, with the help of 4 employees. The business continued to thrive, and 20 years later, I was managing over 1,500 homes with a team of 30 dedicated employees, including the invaluable Stan, who proved to be a remarkable asset to the company. Despite lacking a college education or prior experience, Stan's passion, strong work ethic, and fantastic rapport with the team made him an exceptional manager for our Orlando operations. Recognizing his outstanding contributions, I promoted him, offering a substantial increase in pay and the possibility of future ownership in the company. Our professional relationship flourished into a genuine friendship, and we enjoyed working together. Over the years, I expanded the business from Tampa to Orlando, establishing it as the premier pool service company in Central Florida. With the vast majority of homes having pools that required constant care and maintenance, our services were in high demand. Our revenue and profit soared, strengthening the company's position in the market. As the business grew, the importance of financial management became evident. I relied on Howard, a trusted and experienced family member who was a retired tax accountant with a wealth of knowledge in finance. Under his advice, I leveraged all the equity in my home to expand the business when mortgage rates were extremely low. My trust in Howard was a testament to his expertise and dedication. He, along with his attorney spouse, played a significant role in our success, providing invaluable advice and recommendations that proved to be instrumental in the company's prosperity. Howard's wife, Beth, was a corporate attorney and suggested placing the company into a trust to protect the assets from liabilities and any potential lawsuits in the future. I followed her advice and became the sole trustee. Ah, the joys of married life and the pursuit of a dream home. My wife, Laura, and her crew of girlfriends simply adored our new estate home. Picture this. A posh upscale neighborhood with a massive swimming pool, an oversized patio that boasts a charming tiki bar, and a grilling area that would make any BBQ enthusiast drool. Oh, and let's not forget about all the luxurious amenities that Laura had insisted on having. She had got a knack for getting what she wanted, and I could never say no to her persuasive charm. You see, these homes in our fancy neighborhood were appreciating faster than a shooting star. So, naturally, I gave in to Laura's every upgrade whim, knowing full well that when the time came to sell, we'd be rolling in dough. Love has a funny way of making us do things we never thought we would, but hey, it was all for the greater good, right? Well, today's the day. Laura and her crew of gal pals have descended upon our fancy abode for a weekend of pure indulgence. As they arrived, I received strict instructions not to disrupt their shenanigans. They were on a mission to have a blast without us husbands around. And boy, did I happily oblige. I was more than ready to escape the clutches of girl talk and gossip for the weekend. With fishing rods in hand and a heart full of freedom, I dashed out of there faster than a pack of excited puppies. A fishing trip sounded like paradise after slaving away for weeks running my growing company. The thought of reeling in some big catches and sipping a cold one with the boys was pure heaven. As I left the ladies to their wine-fueled afternoon of giggles and secrets, I couldn't help but think how lucky I was to have Laura and her gang of mischief makers in my life. Sure, they might drive us husbands crazy at times, but deep down, we knew they were the spice that added flavor to our otherwise ordinary days. I couldn't help but smile as I drove over to Roger's house, knowing that the weekend's adventures were just beginning. We had meticulously planned our trip to the lake, aiming to depart at 6 p.m. to reach our destination by 9 p.m. The 3-day excursion promised to be an exciting time, filled with fishing and camaraderie. As we gathered our gear and packed up the car, I suddenly realized that I had forgotten my special fishing lure, which I had been diligently working on in my workshop. For me, fishing was not just a hobby, it was a passion. I took great pride in crafting my fishing lures and tackle combinations, believing that the right equipment could make all the difference in a successful catch. This particular lure I had been working on for the past week held a special significance to me. It was a labor of love, a custom creation tailored to attract the biggest fish and bring me joy on the water. Knowing the impact of having the perfect lure, I couldn't fathom going on the trip without it. So, I informed my fellow fishing buddies that I needed to retrieve my prize lure before we embarked on our adventure. They chuckled good naturally, understanding my dedication to the sport. I jumped in my car at 5 p.m. and drove the 7 minutes back to my house, parked behind all the women's cars and walked to the side door, and quietly made my way down to the workshop, not wanting to disturb the girls or get yelled at for coming home early. Trying to remain quiet, I made my way over to the bench and noticed that I could hear the women chatting. I remember laughing when I realized they were already drunk as they were giggling and having fun. They were sitting in the shade next to the tiki hut, which was at the side of my house. The workbench was just below the outside window and was close enough to hear their conversation. Now, I am not an eavesdropper and couldn't give a crap about their conversion, but when I heard my wife talking about me in bed, my attention perked up. I don't know why, but I thought that I should record this part of the conversation and tease her with it when I got back, so I turned on the recording application on my iPhone. The next few minutes ruined my fishing trip and turned my world upside down. Apparently, I just walked into the middle of a steamy gossip session. The ladies were certainly not holding back, and I couldn't help but chuckle at their candidness. It seemed like they were discussing the not-so-private details of their love lives, and things were getting spicy. Laura, with her mischievous laugh, didn't shy away from dishing out the details about her relationship with her husband, me. I heard her tell the girls how great I was with my tongue, and that I never failed to bring her off and satisfy her after all these years. I couldn't help but think, you go Laura. Brag about your stud hubby. She continued, but it's true what they say. After years of marriage, things might not be as wild as they once were. But hey, it happens to the best of us. But then, out of nowhere, one of the girls dropped the million-dollar question. Is that why you did it with Stan? My ears perked up as I leaned in, curious to see how Laura would respond to that bombshell. The girls were in full detective mode, trying to piece together the puzzle of Laura's recent escapades. If Laura's candidness was anything to go by, I had a feeling this conversation was about to take an interesting turn. I could feel the suspense, and a dash of intrigue hung in the air as the girls waited for Laura's response. Fuck. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Did I hear it right? Did Laura just say she did something with Stan, our Stan? Panic and disbelief washed over me like a tidal wave, and I leaned further in, desperate to catch every single word. My mind raced, trying to process this shocking revelation. Stan, who I trusted and considered a friend, had been involved in something with my wife. It felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. Every word they uttered felt like a dagger to my heart. The giggles and laughter that once brought joy now sounded like a cruel symphony of betrayal. My hands trembled as I clutched the phone, my heart pounding in my chest, and tears threatening to spill from my eyes. As I continued to eavesdrop on this gut-wrenching conversation, I felt like a helpless bystander in my own life. The shock and hurt were almost too much to bear, and I desperately wished I could rewind time and erase those words from existence. At that moment, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. The trust I had placed in both Laura and Stan had been shattered into a million pieces. I felt lost, betrayed, and utterly broken. The pain was unbearable, and I was lost and devastated all at once. As I listened to the conversation unfolding, I realized that my life would never be the same again. The innocence and happiness that once filled our home would now be replaced with heartache and despair. No, Bob and I have a good sex life, and he's always satisfied me in that way. I love him and would never intentionally have started anything with Stan. It kind of just happened. Come on, Laura, you cheated on Bob. You can't be that satisfied with your marriage. No, you don't understand. My love for Bob is everything. He's not just my man, he's my home, my rest, my heart, and my safe place. And, yes, he satisfies me. I love him dearly. This stupid thing with Stan was just a big mistake. But you said Stan was a great lover, so we assume you had sex with him. We don't get it. Tell us the whole story. Girls, anything I tell you has to stay here. The guys would kill Stan, and my husband would kick me to the curb if he found out I would never hurt him that way. He's such a sweet man, but he would never understand. Do you promise to keep this just between us girls? I didn't hear anything, but I assumed they all nodded their heads in agreement. Okay, you can't repeat any of this, but after Susan dumped Stan last month, he was distraught. He was completely shocked. He was about to ask her to marry him. That afternoon when I saw him at the restaurant, we sat together, and he opened up to me and told me the entire story. Girls, he cried. This big strong stud was crying, and my heart went out to him. I felt so bad for him, so I sat with him until he calmed down. He was so depressed and upset I felt almost a motherly need to take care of him. Yes, you're old enough to be his mother. Give us a break, Laura. You had a sexual need to take care of him, not a motherly need. Well, as it turned out, you're right, but at the time sex had not crossed my mind. Anyway, he walked me to my car and thanked me for being a good friend and letting him unburden his feelings. I just smiled and gave him a friendly kiss. That's when the spark started. Before I could move away from him, he pulled me close and gave me the sexiest kiss I can remember. It's been years since Bob kissed me like that, and that kiss turned my knees to jello. Hearing her say that caused me great pain and a heavy pounding in my chest. I shook, but I'm not sure if it was from anger or fear of what she would say next. After we broke the kiss, and without saying a word, he took my hand and led me to his truck, which was parked several rows over under a shaded tree. Don't ask me why I let him do this, it felt like I was spellbound. Anyway, we sat in the back of his truck and made out like high school sweethearts for the next few minutes, and that's when he told me he always found me so sexy and fantasized about being with me. I have to admit that I was overwhelmed and flushed from his compliments, but I can't explain what I did next. When he placed my hand on his crotch, I felt his massive cock. Huge. I mean, it was a raging hard-on, visible under his jeans. I have to admit, I didn't think about Bob or our family at all then. As if in a trance, I unbuckled his belt and lowered his pants to reveal his cock, and wow. It was big. Bob is a good size, and I have no complaints, but this was porn star big. I can't explain it, but I just felt this urge to taste it. I ended up giving him one of my best blowjobs for the next 5 minutes until he exploded in my mouth. He was so thankful and said he needed that after what he had been going through. Did you swallow or spit? Mary asked as they all giggled. Oh, I swallowed every last drop, and he tasted great. I know what I said in the past about never swallowing Bob's cum, and how I hated it, but I can't explain why I needed to swallow Stan's cum, but I did, and I loved it. Hearing that was like a hot slicing my heart in two. I can't express the level of pain those words made as they penetrated every cell in my body. I felt myself shiver and shake as a feeling of loss overcame me. Roger's wife, Mary, spoke next. Wow. That's hot. We never realized you had that in you. Me neither. I never thought about doing anything like that before, but it just kind of happened. That's when Scott's wife, Emily, chimed in. I think all of us girls dream of doing that, but it never happens. Good for you. I'm so jealous. Tell us what happened next. I could tell from Laura's voice that she knew what she did was wrong, and was feeling a profound sense of regret for crossing the line she never should have crossed. Well, after I came to my senses and I realized what I had done, I suddenly felt overcome with guilt. I knew what I did was wrong and that Bob would never understand, so I had to make sure it never happened again. I told Stan this was a one-time thing, and we could never do anything like that again. Then I told him that Bob was his friend, and he would feel betrayed by both of us if he found out. Stan agreed. He said it was just a moment of passion and would remain our secret forever. As I stood there, my heart torn between shock and pain, Laura's confessions still echoing in my mind, Mary's words delivered the final blow to any glimmer of hope I had left. That shattered the last remnants of my illusions, leaving me feeling utterly lost and devastated. Well then, how did you end up in bed with Stan and turn your husband into a cuckold? Hearing that question turned me into a broken man, humiliated and lost. I wanted to strangle both Stan and my cheating wife with my bare hands. Laura hesitated her answer before she revealed how Stan had reached out to her, seeking solace in his time of despair. The momentary ecstasy had been overshadowed by the realization of the betrayal and the depth of the hurt she had caused. When she spoke, it sounded like her words were tinged with sadness, as she revealed the intimate details she shared with Stan. In a somber voice she spoke, "No, please don't think that. Bob's not a cuck, he'd never allow that to happen. I just made another stupid mistake. I really fucked up and should have known better. Stan called me to ask me to lunch, but I said no and told him that we really shouldn't be seen together. He said he was depressed and needed someone to talk to, and he felt as if I was the only one that understood what he was going through. Stan told me he'd make us lunch if I came over to his house for just an hour. That was when I made another colossal mistake by going to his house alone. We sat and talked as we ate the salads, along with another glass of wine. After an hour of small talk, he told me how moved he was by our last time together. He was standing next to me as he was about to take our dishes to the sink and kiss me again. This time it was one of those romantic panty-dropping kisses we girls dream about. Long story short, we ended up in his bed for the entire afternoon. It wasn't romantic by any means, just raw sex. I knew it was wrong, but it just happened. And to be honest, it was the best sex I've had in years. Girls, I'd never felt anything so big and deep inside me before. It had been a while since he had sex, and he was a wild man. The first time Stan came inside me, his cum overflowed my pussy. I mean, he must have shot a gallon inside me, and I came so hard and screamed so loud, I was sure the neighbors heard us. It was an amazing few hours of hot sex, but we both knew it wasn't going to happen again. After I showered and dressed, I did tell him that this would never happen again and not to call me. I told him he was a wonderful man and needed to find a woman his own age to love, and that as much as I loved his cock, I wouldn't jeopardize my marriage. We both agreed, and that was the last time. So, you've never been with him again? Only those 2 times. As anger coursed through my veins, I clenched my fists tightly, trying to hold back the tumult of emotions swirling inside me. The revelation of Laura's one-time encounter with Stan felt like a stab to the heart, and the raw pain intensified with every word she uttered. Now knowing that she allowed another man to cum inside her was another blow to my male ego and self-worth. My world was imploding and my life as I knew it was over. The term cock echoed in my mind, a hurtful label that I never thought would be associated with my marriage. The rage surged, but I also felt a desperate desire to salvage what was left of our relationship. I didn't want to lose her, but I couldn't bear the weight of the betrayal either. My mind raced, grappling with conflicting emotions. The hurt and anger mixed with a sense of powerlessness, leaving me feeling lost and vulnerable. How could she do this? How could she betray our trust in such a way? Just as I was searching for a glimmer of hope, Laura's next comment hit me like a ton of bricks. It was as if she had poured salt into an already open wound. Her words tore at my heart, intensifying my anger and disbelief. I know it was wrong, but like I said, it just happened. At that moment, the anger reached its peak. How could she dare to brush off her actions as if they were some uncontrollable impulses? The anger surged anew as I heard my wife trivializing her infidelities. I felt a sense of indignation, a feeling of betrayal that went beyond the physical act. She had willingly put our marriage at risk for a moment of pleasure. The room seemed to close in on me as the anger swelled, and I struggled to find a way to process it all. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. The pain was overwhelming, and I felt a crushing weight on my chest. At that moment, I realized that I couldn't make sense of it all right away. Then hearing her speak again, I listened closely for any hope for our future together. As she spoke, her voice quivered with emotion. Laura acknowledged that despite the guilt she carried, she couldn't help but reminisce about the intense passion she shared with Stan. She described how those memories had become a secret sanctuary she sought when making love to me. No, never again. All I have now are those wonderful memories. I hate to admit it, but I use them when Bob's making love to me. I know it's wrong, but I can't stop thinking of Stan's big cock and how it felt inside me. I can't get him out of my head. I've never experienced the deep orgasms he gave me before or since then. Now those memories are all I'll have. Bob will never know that it's not his cock that makes me cum while he's making love to me. Girls, Stan has ruined my pussy, and even with all the guilt I carry, I still can't get him out of my head. It was a bittersweet confession. Laura's words carried a sense of longing, as she grappled with the realization that those memories with Stan would forever remain a part of her, no matter how much she wished she could erase them. Emily had been quiet but spoke up after Laura's admission. Laura, I'm so jealous. I love Scott as well, but I'd love to give a big cock like Stan's a go. Don't repeat this, but Scott's kind of small. I love him dearly, but I'd kill to try out a big cock, just once. I heard Mary make a low moan as if the story was getting her hot. That's wild. And poor Bob is clueless. He has no idea about Stan or that you fantasize about him during sex. God, that's so wicked, Laura. But you better fix your head and forget about Stan. Bob's not a stupid man, and you might slip up and hurt him. Don't worry about Bob. I make sure he's taken care of. And trust me, he'll never know about this, and I'll never do it again, I swear. It was a mistake, and living with this guilt has been difficult. To be honest, along with the wine, finally telling someone the entire story is helping me. My future was now in peril as the girls giggled and enjoyed their girl talk at my expense. I was the sucker that purchased a big house, paid the bills, and allowed my wife to enjoy a luxurious life without having to work. Spa, country club, shopping, new big house, with her pool for entertainment, and a housekeeper, all on my dime. The sucker, better known as the clueless husband. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The shock of Laura's confession had left me in a state of disbelief, and tears streamed down my face, betraying the depth of my pain. Time seemed to pass in a blur as I listened to the conversation, and I was unable to tear myself away from the painful truth. I knew I had to leave, to distance myself from the situation, at least for now. With a heavy heart, I picked up my fishing lure, along with the bottle of Amontillado sherry I bought for the guys, then made my way back to Roger's house. The guys were waiting for my return, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. Tears continued to flow as I drove, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. I needed time to process everything, to come to terms with the betrayal I had just discovered. I wasn't ready to face Laura, to confront her about what I had learned. The pain was too raw, too overwhelming. I wanted to stick with the original plan, going away for the weekend and seeking solace in a place where I could be alone with my thoughts. But fate seemed to have a cruel sense of humor as I realized I would be spending those days with Stan, the very person who had been involved in the heartbreaking affair. The prospect of being around him only added to my anguish. I didn't know what to expect, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on my mind. Would I be able to keep my emotions in check? Could I face him without strangling him or revealing the devastation I felt inside? As I drove back to Roger's house, the tears continued to fall, and I felt a profound sense of loss and pain. The weekend ahead loomed like a dark cloud, and I was unsure of how I would navigate through it. All I knew was that I needed time to heal, to find a way to come to terms with the shattered pieces of my heart. At that moment, I felt utterly alone, feeling the betrayal of someone I loved and trusted. The sadness in my heart was overwhelming, and I prayed that somehow, someday, I would find a way to mend the broken pieces of my soul. When I arrived, Roger was outside loading up his Escalade. As I approached, he could tell there was something wrong, and that my eyes were glassy. I knew I was not ready to say anything, but when he asked what was wrong, I came up with a good answer. Bob, what's wrong? You look like shit. What's going on? Sorry Roger, I have a migraine coming on, and I just need to shut down for a while. Are you sure? Man, you look bad. Yeah, I'm used to dealing with this. Just let me sit in the front for the ride and I'll shut my eyes and I'm sure I'll be fine. Besides, there's no way I'll miss our annual trip, I need to get away. Of course, no problem. Why don't you go inside and relax and we'll finish packing. We'll leave in about 30 minutes. I'll come to get you when we're ready. Sure enough, 30 minutes later I was in the front seat and my buddy Roger took care of me. He took his wife's sleeping eye cover and a pair of his noise-canceling headphones and handed them to me as I sat in the passenger seat, as Stan and Scott sat in the back. Along with the blindfold, the headphones put me in a dark place. My sensory perception was now limited to smell, touch, and taste, which allowed me to contemplate this unexpected situation. The guys understood my quietness and offered to help if I needed anything. I couldn't look at Stan, just kept my eyes shut and thanked them for their understanding. For the next 3 hours, still in that dark place, I was able to sit in peace and contemplate the train wreck I had just witnessed. I thought back to all of our years together, how I worshipped Laura, and felt blessed when she gave me Michael and Katie, our wonderful children. The mental images of Laura sucking Stan's cock and taking him inside her were all I could think about. The more I tried to stop, the more I saw her spread legs taking Stan's big cock. She said it was only one time and she felt guilty and would never do it again. I wanted to find a way to forgive her and get past that, but the killer for me was remembering those final words on how she thinks of Stan while I make love to her, and dreams of her orgasms with him when she has hers. As a red-blooded man, I can't imagine any guy getting past that. No. Sadly, I believe that confession ended our marriage. I thought about all the good times we spent together as a family, and how that might be over. Tears started and I wiped them away before they became visible. For the first time I can remember, I was struggling and lost. I had no answers or ideas on what to do and must have fallen asleep, because the last thing I remember is Roger shaking my shoulder, waking me up. "Dude, are you okay? How are you feeling?" he said, now at the fishing cabin. For the next 2 days, I was unusually quiet and used my migraine as an excuse. The guys left me alone as I tried not to ruin the trip for Scott and Roger. I continued to struggle with my feelings as I looked at my life, both past and future. It was difficult, but I knew I would survive. 2 days later, still in doubt, I found myself on a trail to the lake alone with Stan. Roger and Scott were going to meet us down at the boat dock. I found myself following Stan through the woods. As I followed him along the path, I heard Laura's words echo in my head, and suddenly I was full of rage. I noticed a large falling branch, the size of a large baseball bat on the side of the path. Without thinking, I picked it up and felt the heavy weight of the branch in my hands, looked at Stan about 20 paces in front of me, and suddenly charged forward, raising the heavy branch and bringing it down hard onto Stan's right shoulder. I was going for his head, but at the last second changed direction and shattered his collarbone, causing Stan a searing pain as he fell to the ground. Standing over at him, I was looking down at the man that fucked my wife. He was holding his shoulder as I yelled, "That's for fucking my wife." I then kicked him as hard as I could between his legs. I hit his balls as hard as I could, and watched him curl up wailing in pain until he blacked out. A few moments later I came back to my senses and moved Stan over to a tree and sat him up while he recovered. A few minutes later he regained consciousness. "What the fuck? Look asshole, I know all about you and Laura, and right now you're lucky you're still alive. Man, I'm sorry it just happened." Bob's face turned red with rage. "Shut the fuck up. You fucked her, end of the story. Don't even talk to me for the rest of the trip, and you don't say one word to Laura about this. If you do, I swear you will live to regret it. I'm not sure what I plan to do with her, but I don't need you fucking that up as well. You've destroyed my 20-year marriage, don't fuck up my revenge as well. Bob, she loves you. You can't divorce her. This is all my fault and I'm sorry, please just take it out on me, not her. Bob, I was hurting from Susan leaving me and Laura was there for me. It just happened and she felt guilty after I pushed her. Man, you can't divorce her, she loves you." I kicked him in the balls again. I said shut up. Just then Roger and Scott saw me kicking him again and ran over and pulled me away. "Bob, what are you doing? What's going on?" Stan was quiet and held his balls in pain. Roger helped Stan get up, and we went back to the cabin for the next hour. Stan was holding his shoulder, acting all pissed off because I attacked him from behind, and how it wasn't a fair fight. I glared at him and told him to shut up, and then played the recording for everyone to hear. When the recording ended, Roger screamed at his nephew, "You fucking asshole. You betrayed our friend and the man that gave you a job when you were down and out and took you into his trust. You fucked one of our wives, and had the nerve to come with us on this trip. And, you're pissed off that Bob hurt you. You should be thankful that we didn't dump your ass in the middle of the lake. We don't want to see or hear from you for the rest of this trip, not one word. And you should be thankful you're still alive," Roger said. Scott spoke up, "You know guys, there's another problem with this recording. You heard what my wife and Mary said and how exciting it was. All of our wives were excited about Laura's cheating and keeping it a secret. I don't know about you, but I have a problem with that, and when I get back Emily and I will be having a serious conversation." "Yeah, you're right, Scott. That was bullshit and disrespectful to all of us." He turned to Stan, giving him a death stare, and said, "See what you've done, asshole. You've destroyed one marriage and possibly 2 others. Maybe we should dump you in the middle of the lake." Stan just looked down at the floor and remained silent. He finally realized how badly he screwed up. Bob spoke, "Guys, I agree they are all involved, but please give me a few days before you do anything. I'll give you a copy of the recording, but I need to confront Laura before she knows what I've learned. Thanks to this asshole, I don't think I can stay with her. Hell, every time we make love now, I'll know she's thinking about his big dick. There's no way I can be with her knowing that. I'm probably going to divorce her. I know I can't be with her. I just need a few days to figure things out." Roger looked over at his nephew Stan. "You're a piece of shit. You will not speak to Laura or the other wives without our approval. If you warn Laura what's about to come down on her, we will make your life a living hell. Right now, if you disappeared, none of us would be upset. You're my nephew and family, which is the only reason I haven't beaten your ass and left you in those woods. You've hurt our friend and a good man. Just because you couldn't keep your girlfriend, you go after another man's wife. You're a piece of shit, and I'm embarrassed to admit you're my sister's kid. Not a word, do you understand, asshole?" Stan nodded and understood. Nobody spoke to him again for the entire trip, and to his credit, he stayed out of the way and avoided any conflict. I just had to figure out what I was going to do with Laura. As we drove back home, I considered everything and wondered how Laura would have reacted if the roles were reversed. That was it. Suddenly, I had a plan. Deep down I loved Laura, and probably could get over the one-off fuck and suck with Stan, but the thought of her dreaming of him while making love with me was too much. I decided to leave Laura's fate in her own hands. The plan was to talk about an affair, leading her to think it was me who had the affair, and see how she reacts and what she would do. If she forgave the one-off sex, then I would do the same for her and work things out. However she reacts, in exactly the way I will treat her and our marriage. The solution to her infidelity will be in her own hands. My stomach was turning upside down, and my anger resurfaced as I returned home and pulled into my driveway. I was in a dark place, but it was time to face Laura, and I needed to keep my feelings in check and act normal, which was going to be one of the hardest things I've ever done. I got a warm welcome home when I entered the house. Laura was dressed up and looking nice when she gave me a big hug and an excellent welcome home kiss, which I was going to miss if she chose that path. I was still pissed, but I still loved the cheating slut. My blood was boiling as I thought about what she had done, but the smells of her perfume and the nice dinner she prepared helped calm me down. We had an excellent dinner, and somehow, I remained pleasant and listened to her tell me about the last few days. It was still relatively early when she took me up to the bedroom, saying she missed me and needed some extra loving. Obviously, she was horny and wanted some sex. I smiled to myself knowing she was about to determine our future. Laura didn't waste time and had my pants down around my ankles a minute after we were on the bed. She was on her knees and started licking my shaft until it was hard, and then gave me a world-class, sloppy wet blowjob that got me rock hard. I tried to come during the blowjob because I didn't want to be inside her, as I knew she would be thinking of Stan. I knew that this was something I would envision every time we made love. She knew I was getting close, and stopped her ministrations on my cock. In a second, she was naked on the bed pulling me on top of her. I wanted to fuck her in the worst way, but all I could hear were her words about dreaming of Stan's cock while I made love to her, and for the first time in our relationship my cock softened and was unable to penetrate her pussy. Laura looked up at me in shock. I could tell she felt hurt by my lack of excitement. "Baby, what's wrong? You don't want to fuck me?" it was showtime. I had my phone on the night table recording the audio so that there would not be any misunderstanding of my conversation. Laura, there's something I need to tell you. There's someone else, and I feel so bad that my cock just can't perform. Shocked, she looked up at me and asked, "What do you mean, there's someone else?" I'm so sorry. It's only been a couple of times, but the sex is so great I just can't get it out of my head. Her Latin temper flared, as I predicted. You fucking bastard. You fuck someone else and you can't stop thinking of the sex. Baby, it was only sex. I still love you, I said, careful not to say it was me having the affair. I can't believe this. What do you mean you can't stop thinking about it? Well, to be honest, the orgasms were the best ever, and I can't get the thought of all those amazing orgasms out of my head, which is why I can't get hard. I phrased the words carefully, not implicating myself, but just repeating her own words from the recording. She was crying, obviously hurt by the thought of the betrayal. Was I being cruel and mean? Maybe, but in reality, I was the victim, not her. I let her continue. Laura, there's something I need to tell you. There's someone else, and I feel so bad that my cock just can't perform. Shocked, she looked up at me and asked, "What do you mean, there's someone else?" I'm so sorry. It's only been a couple of times, but the sex is so great I just can't get it out of my head. Her Latin temper flared, as I predicted. You fucking bastard. You fuck someone else and you can't stop thinking of the sex. Baby, it was only sex. I still love you, I said, careful not to say it was me having the affair. I can't believe this. What do you mean you can't stop thinking about it? Well, to be honest, the orgasms were the best ever, and I can't get the thought of all those amazing orgasms out of my head, which is why I can't get hard. I phrased the words carefully, not implicating myself, but just repeating her own words from the recording. She was crying, obviously hurt by the thought of the betrayal. Was I being cruel and mean? Maybe, but in reality, I was the victim, not her. I let her continue. In an angry voice she yelled, "Well, fuck you. You can just pack your shit and get out. I'm not going to stay married to a cheater. You know my dad cheated on my mom, leaving her a broken woman. I will not let you do that to me. Now get out. I'm going to divorce your ass and make you pay for this. I've been a perfect wife. I gave you 2 wonderful children, ran the household, made you dinner, and treated you with love, and this is how you repay me." I almost laughed at her demeanor and comments. She's not going to enjoy this in a few minutes, that's for sure. Laura, it was just sex and it was only those 2 times. Come on, it was just a one-time thing. Are you sure that you want a divorce over this? Listen to me. Only sex. Are you kidding? I don't believe you, and how do I know if there aren't others? I can't trust you, and yes, I want a divorce, and you're going to pay dearly for this. You know our state just passed a new law favoring the injured party from adultery, don't you? I'm going to divorce you under that statute and take you for everything you're worth. Hell, I'll even get your business and keep you on as one of the pool boys, you bastard. Wow, I didn't expect you to be so heartless and cruel. Like I said, there was no love, it was just sex and only those 2 times. Is this really what you want? Are you sure there's no forgiveness possible? Maybe we can go to counseling. I tried to save the marriage, but she was in fact making the decision to end it, and she didn't even know it. No. We're done. I won't stay married to a cheater. Just pack some of your clothes and get out. Stay with Roger or get a hotel room, but I don't want to see you again. You'll hear from my attorney. I couldn't help myself as I smiled. She had no idea that she had just led herself to her own execution. With venom in her voice, she yelled, "Why do you have that smirk on your face, asshole?" Well, sweetheart, you just made my decision a lot easier. What do you mean, your decision? She asked. Let me show you something. Get dressed and come with me. She was still pissed and seething, but she followed me down to my workshop. I had her stand next to the same window where I made the recording. I told her to stay there and not move until I returned. I went outside and synced the Bluetooth speaker with my iPhone, then returned to the workshop. She was still angry, but now looked confused as I stood next to her and then hit play on the phone. My cheating wife was even more confused when she heard herself speaking, but continued to listen, and then the expression on her face changed to one of shock. When she heard the entire conversation, she broke down in tears and fell to her knees. The realization of what had just happened hit her hard. Baby, I'm so sorry. How did you hear that? She said as she continued to cry. Well, I'm not sure why that matters, but I had to come back for some things I forgot to pack. I didn't want to disturb you girls, so I came down the back door to avoid your little party. That's when I heard you talking about me in bed. I recorded it because I was going to share it with you and tease you when I got back. But when you confessed to your affair with Stan, I stayed and recorded everything. Sweetheart, you heard me say it was just a one-off and only sex. You must know there's nothing between us. You have to forgive me, I'm so sorry, you weren't supposed to find out. Amid our tears and heartache, Laura's remorseful words pierced through the pain. Her voice trembled with genuine sorrow and regret as she sought my forgiveness, her vulnerability laid bare. Her plea for understanding washed over me, and I realized that beneath the layers of hurt and anger, there was still a deep love. But I was not swayed by her crying or begging. My voice was cold and distant as I confronted Laura with the painful truth. The hurt ran deep, and I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that had consumed me. The words she had spoken about dreaming of Stan during our intimate moments had shattered the last remaining fragments of trust between us. I heard everything, Laura, I replied, my voice devoid of any warmth. You're right. You left out the part where you confessed to dreaming of him while you and I made love. How can you expect me to just brush that aside? For the first time in our marriage, her tears seemed not to affect me, as the pain of her words lingered heavily in my heart. The image of her dreaming of another man, while I poured my love and soul into our moments together, was too much to bear. I can't ignore that, Laura, I continued, my voice filled with bitterness. I also can't ignore the fact that you were never going to tell me and keep me clueless as you and all your friends would look at me knowing I was your cuck. You shattered something inside me, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. How can I believe that you truly love me when you're dreaming of someone else? My anger swelled, and I couldn't help but feel that I deserved better than this. The thought of being with someone who couldn't fully commit to me was the final blow. I can't just pretend that everything's okay, I said, my voice firm. Dreaming of another man while we're together is a deal breaker for me. I don't know how to love you again when I know that you're thinking of him, not me during our most intimate moments. The pain in my heart was overwhelming, and the thought of rebuilding our relationship seemed impossible. I couldn't find it within myself to forgive her, not when she had betrayed me in such a profound way. The room fell silent as the weight of my words hung heavily in the air. There was nothing left to say, the truth had been spoken, and the hurt was too deep to mend. It was clear that the damage done was irreparable, and the road to forgiveness was one I couldn't fathom traveling. At that moment, I knew that our love had been forever shattered, and the future we had envisioned together was now nothing more than a distant dream. It was a painful realization, but it was one I had to face if I wanted to find a way to heal and move forward, even if it meant doing so without her by my side. No. I didn't mean that, you don't understand. I love you and I don't want him. Bob, you have to give me a chance to explain. Don't lie to me, bitch. I heard what you said on that recording, and the thought of him in our bed is too much for me to handle. I never would have thought you would betray my love and cause me so much pain. If I'm wrong, then look me in the eyes and tell me it's not true. Look at me and tell me you weren't thinking of his big dick and your great orgasms with him while we made love. Yeah, that's right, you can't even look at me. Damn it, you fucked everything up, Laura. I hope you enjoyed his big dick because you'll never have mine again. You can go live with him after I divorce your ass, and then you won't have to dream about him anymore. Openly sobbing and barely audible she said, you can't divorce me, I love you. Please give me a chance to make this right. That's rich. Now you want my forgiveness. Imagine my shock. The cheating slut wants a hall pass, a one-time fuck. I'll make it up to you. I love you. I'm sorry. Where do you get the idea that I would want you after what you did? Do I look like the kind of man that would accept betrayal from a cheating wife? My voice trembled with a mix of emotions as I poured my heart out to Laura. For the last 3 days, I've been torn. Part of me wanted to find a way to forgive you and work things out. I thought maybe I could move past the one-time mistake, but then everything changed when I heard what you said to our friends. The hurt in my heart was palpable, and I couldn't hide the pain in my voice. The fact that she had proudly shared intimate details about her thoughts during our lovemaking had shattered the last remnants of trust I had for her. I'd never openly cried in all our years together, but when I couldn't hold back my pain any longer, I felt humiliated. Laura, I continued, with tears falling and my voice quivering. Those women, our friends, now see me as the clueless husband. I think I even heard Mary call me a cuckold. You have no idea how humiliation that was. It's like I've been living in a lie, oblivious to what was going on behind my back. Knowing they're laughing at me and calling me clueless destroyed any self-worth I had left. And because of that, they are no longer part of my life. You succeeded in ending our friendships on top of our marriage. She was noticeably shaken when she saw my tears, and knew she had hurt me beyond her comprehension. I believe that in her heart, she never wanted to hurt me, but my tears made her realize what her selfish act had caused. She then felt a crushing level of regret and sadness, as she openly cried and tried to hold me. I pushed her away and took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. I know I may have been a clueless husband in the past, but things have changed now. I can't ignore what I know, and I won't be a cuck, as your friends now refer to me. I will not allow myself to be treated like that by anyone again. As I spoke, the pain of the betrayal echoed in my voice. I had desperately wanted to save our marriage, to find a way back to the love we once shared. But the reality of the situation was sinking in, and I couldn't see a clear path forward. You know, on our way back from the fishing trip, I thought about how to salvage our marriage, I admitted, my voice breaking. But the truth is, I couldn't find a way to do it. So, I've decided to let you make the decision. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, and I don't want to live a life filled with doubt and pain. As I finished speaking, there was a long pause, the silence heavy with the weight of our emotions. The future was uncertain, and I didn't know what lay ahead for us. But one thing was clear: I couldn't bear to live in a marriage filled with betrayal and doubt. What do you mean, you would let me make the decision? Well, since I couldn't decide what to do about us, I had a plan. I would tell you a story about an affair, and however you responded and acted was how I was going to move forward. The beauty of my plan was that you alone were going to decide the fate of our marriage. In the story I just told 20 minutes ago, I never said I had an affair, only that there was an affair. I repeated what you said about how they were in bed with us, you know, how you dream of him. Well, I give you all my love. Well, 20 minutes ago I told you about the affair being a one-off mistake, and it was only sex, not love. I asked you if there was any way we could get past it. I even offered to go to counseling. Do you remember what you told me? You told me to get out of our house. You told me that you were going to destroy me in a divorce. You told me you were going to take my business and turn me into a pool boy. You showed no mercy. Well, that's exactly what you can expect from me now. I won't kick you out like you did to me, but you will move into the guest room as I don't want you in my bed. I'll be meeting with the attorney and filing under adultery. I can't wait to use that new divorce law you told me about with all of your vitriol. Bob, I didn't mean any of that, you have to believe me. Don't do this. What about all our 20 years and the kids? The raw emotion in my voice was evident as I confronted Laura, my heart breaking with each word. The pain of betrayal was too great to bear, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of her actions on our entire family. I know this is going to be hard, I said, my voice trembling with hurt and anger. But I can't ignore what you did, Laura. You didn't think about the kids or our years together when you decided to betray me and our family. The sense of her betrayal cut deep, and the pain in my heart was overwhelming. The trust that had once bound us together had been broken, and I couldn't fathom how to move past it. What you did is unforgivable, I continued, my voice firmly. And you will have to face the consequences, just like you were so ready to give me punishment for my mistakes. Now, move your things out of my bedroom. My voice was heavy with sorrow as I led her away, physically separating her from the space we once shared. The room that had been a sanctuary for our love was now tainted by the betrayal that had unfolded. That night, sleep eluded me as I mourned the death of my marriage. I had loved her with all my heart, and the realization that she had been dreaming of another man during our most intimate moments continued to overwhelm me, like a dark cloud. I know some men could forgive their wives for such transgressions, but I couldn't find it within myself to do so. The pain was too great, and the trust that had been broken felt irreparable. Despite my love for her, I couldn't find a way to get past what she had said. The dream of a future together felt forever broken, and the loss was immeasurable. All I could do was honor my feelings and emotions, even if it meant letting go of the woman I once loved so deeply. Before leaving, I looked down at the woman I loved for over the last 2 decades and said, "You've broken my heart. Today I lost someone who didn't care about me, but today you lost someone who would have done anything for you." The sounds of begging for forgiveness followed me until I walked away from Laura for the last time. Bob made the heartbreaking call to his children, dreading the moment he had to share the devastating news. His son, Michael, offered his understanding and unwavering support, a glimmer of solace amid the chaos. However, Katie's reaction shattered his hopes. The anger she displayed, a reflection of her close bond with her mother, pierced his heart. Bob tried his best to make her understand, but the chasm between them seemed insurmountable. In a rare display of strength, Laura took it upon herself to speak to Katie, acknowledging her grave mistake and urging her not to harbor too much anger towards her father, who had done nothing wrong. The kids' lives were forever altered by the fallout, but Bob was determined to ensure their future was secure, promising to fund their college education and take care of them. The confrontation between the guys and their wives was laden with betrayal and heartache. Mary's heart shattered upon learning about Laura's divorce, feeling the weight of their long friendship crumbling. Roger was seething with rage, unable to comprehend why his wife had kept the affair a secret, and even worse, why she had seemingly encouraged it. The revelation on the recording was a soul-crushing blow, leaving him questioning everything. The hurt was too profound to ignore, and the bond they once shared seemed irreparably broken. The days that followed were filled with raw emotions and heartache, as the consequences of their actions unraveled before them. The once tight-knit group of friends now found themselves facing the harsh reality of betrayal and shattered trust. Mary, devastated by the news of Laura's divorce, was confronted by Roger, her husband, about her role in keeping the affair a secret. Her heart sank as she realized the gravity of her actions. Roger's anger was palpable, and he demanded answers as to why she had protected Laura and betrayed their best friend. The weight of her guilt and the realization of her complicity left her speechless and remorseful. At Scott's house, a similar scene unfolded when Emily heard the hurtful words she had spoken about her husband on the recording. The humiliation and shame were too much for Scott to bear, and he made the painful decision to leave, leaving Emily in tears and regret. Meanwhile, at Bob and Laura's home, the tension was thick as Bob handed Laura the divorce papers. Laura pleaded with him to forgive her, realizing the magnitude of her mistake and the pain she had caused. Her pleas fell on deaf ears, as Bob's heart was too wounded to consider reconciliation. The hurt was deep, and he knew he could never trust her again. Judge Montresor presided over our case, and the divorce proceedings became a painful ordeal, with Laura desperately trying to salvage the marriage. The court battle brought forth Stan's testimony, filled with regret for the destruction he had caused. Stan was told to either testify truthfully or feel the wrath of the anger from the husbands. Regretfully and with heavy guilt, his testimony sounded more like an admission of guilt, and offered an apology to the injured parties. Tears filled the courtroom as the final blow to the marriage was delivered. Laura's heart sank further as she relived the affair through the playback of the recording. The judge's ruling was swift, granting Bob a significant portion of their assets, and denying any spousal support under the new state statute put into place. Laura was left with the painful realization of how her actions had led to the demise of her marriage. The excitement and passion she had experienced with Stan now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the regret and pain she had inflicted on Bob. The once bright future they had envisioned together had crumbled, leaving Laura with the weight and the consequences of her affair. As she faced the bleak reality of her situation, she knew that she had lost not only her marriage, but also her sense of security and the life she had once cherished. The aftermath of their actions had forever changed the lives of these friends, leaving behind a trail of heartache, regret, and broken trust. The consequences of their choices would continue to shape their futures, as they grappled with the pain of their past mistakes, and searched for a way to move forward. Because Bob still loved her, he offered Laura their guest room to live in until she could get a place of her own and plan out her future. The home was large enough for them to live there without much engagement. Bob worked harder and longer hours in an effort to keep sane, and came home late enough not to see her. To her credit, Laura continued to try to win Bob back, but he had no intention of ever being with her again. He started dating Becky, his secretary, who was more than thrilled to make Bob happy. She knew Bob was a good catch, and even though he was 10 years her senior, she was happy with him in bed, and enjoyed the massive orgasms he gave her. Bob was a good man, and Becky couldn't believe Laura's stupidity and her luck. She would never give Bob a reason to worry or doubt her love. The emotional turmoil of the past 2 months weighed heavily on Laura's shoulders. Seeing Becky move in with Bob, occupying the space that was once theirs, was like a constant reminder of the life she had lost. It tore at her heart to witness the happiness and affection being shared between her ex-husband and the woman who was now taking her place. Every glance, every touch, and every shared moment between Bob and Becky felt like a stab to Laura's heart. Jealousy gnawed at her, and she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret for her actions that led to this situation. Her once happy home, now filled with love between Bob and another woman, was a constant source of pain and sorrow. The bed they used to share, the one where they had once slept side by side, now became the site of intimacy between Bob and Becky. The thought of them together in that very spot crushed Laura's soul. It was a harsh reminder that she had given up her husband through her selfishness, and she now had to face the consequences of her actions. Feeling alone and scared, Laura struggled to find a way out of this emotional abyss. With no job and few prospects, the future seemed uncertain and daunting. She was haunted by the fear of being alone, without the man she once loved so deeply, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead only added to her distress. Having no other options, Laura had to accept her living arrangements reluctantly, knowing that she had lost the man she once held dear. As she faced the reality of her situation, Laura knew that she had to come to terms with her past mistakes and work on rebuilding her life. It was a painful journey, but she knew that she needed to find her own strength and inner resilience to move forward. Despite the challenges ahead, Laura hoped that one day she could find peace and happiness again, even if it meant letting go of the man she once thought would be with her forever. At Bob's office, when the other workers found out that Stan had caused Bob's divorce, they treated him like someone with leprosy. Nobody talked to him socially and treated him like the asshole he was. He realized he couldn't stay there as they made his life miserable, screwing up jobs, causing complaints and loss of money. Stan decided to open his own business and took several accounts with him. Bob's attorney explained that Stan was under a non-compete contract and was breaking their contract. Stan, not being educated, didn't even realize any of this and continued to grow his business. Bob's attorney told him to be patient and wait a few months until they could present a proper case. 10 months later, Stan had amassed over 100 accounts, and his business was flourishing at an impressive pace. He felt on top of the world, basking in the success he had worked so hard to achieve. However, that euphoria was short-lived when the attorney filed a devastating lawsuit against Stan, demanding a staggering $1 million. The claim accused him of not only causing significant financial loss, but also breaching the ironclad non-compete contract. As the legal battle raged on, Bob, still nursing the wounds left by Stan's actions, was fueled by a burning desire for revenge. Money was the least of his concerns. He yearned to make Stan pay for the pain of stealing his beloved wife, shattering his once happy marriage, and callously poaching his loyal customers. When the dust finally settled, the outcome was catastrophic for Stan. Bob emerged victorious, seizing ownership of Stan's once thriving business, and leaving him with no choice but to file for personal bankruptcy. The dream career he had built, with the possibility of owning a piece of Bob's company, a multi-million-dollar enterprise, crumbled before his eyes, leaving him destitute and emotionally shattered. With no formal education to rely on, Stan had no alternative but to turn to grueling day labor, just to scrape by and make ends meet. The harsh consequences of his actions had taken a toll on him, and he learned a painful lesson that would haunt him forever: never again to meddle with another man's wife or betray trust so callously. Scott and Roger's wives realized how close they had come to jeopardizing their marriages as Laura did. It was a wake-up call for them, and they understood the value of their husband's forgiveness, and the need to respect and cherish their relationships. They decided to work on rebuilding their trust and communication to avoid such mistakes in the future. Over time, they managed to strengthen their marriages and move forward together with a newfound appreciation for their partner's love and forgiveness. They no longer socialized with Laura or Bob, and missed the good times they once shared. Laura's life took a somber turn as she navigated the aftermath of her failed marriage. With a heavy heart, she accepted that Bob would never take her back. Finding a job as a receptionist at a dental office offered her some stability, but it couldn't fill the void left by the loss of her once happy marriage. Living in a small apartment, she felt the weight of loneliness and regret every day. Trying to move on, she met an older man from the office and began dating, but the new relationship could never compare to the love she had lost with Bob. The happiness she once knew was now only a distant memory, and she couldn't help but feel the pain of her past mistakes haunting her every step. In her quiet moments, she would reflect on what could have been, wishing she had made different choices, and held on to the life she had with Bob. However, she had to come to terms with the reality that she had let go of something special and irreplaceable. The future that once looked so bright was now a shadow of its former self, leaving her with a profound sense of sadness and longing for what was lost. Bob did miss Laura, but Becky quickly filled that void and made it her mission to be the perfect other half. Bob loved the young woman's energy and lust, and a year later they were married. Michael and Katie would have a baby half-brother a year later. The musty smell of the waiting room did nothing to quell the sickness in my stomach. I looked around and then back down to my feet, wondering what I was really doing here. To my left sat my beautiful wife Rachel. She looked as radiant as ever with a beauty that never left me without butterflies. To my right sat my daughter Jasmine, who in many ways was my savior. My thoughts drifted back to the day I met each of them. I was a different man back then. Mr. Greenay's voice called out, bringing back to the room. "We will be ready for you in around 20 minutes. The other witness has just taken the stand." I nodded. It would be the first time in over a year that I would come face to face with my ex-wife. The woman I was married to for 12 years of my life, but since then so much has changed. I will start from the day my life changed forever. It was a normal spring day in Albany, New York. I was returning home from my customer accounts job at the local Albany utility company. I hated the job and had pretty much been forced into it by Jessica, my ex-wife. "It is more secure and financially rewarding," she would say. "It is better than construction," was usually the next comment. I should have known earlier that all she seemed to care about was money and social status. I do not want to say too much about Jessica other than at 35 she was still the most beautiful girl in the world to me. She was smart, funny and loved me to death from the moment we met. I always thought she was out of my league. I was working construction back home in the Bronx when we met. I was tall and quite good looking with a permanent tan from always being outdoors. From the moment we began dating we were always together. I was her protector, her entertainer, and she saw past my lack of academia and only seemed to love me with more passion. When she finished her master's degree we moved back to her hometown of Albany and eventually married. Her parents were not thrilled by me at all, oh no, and they made no attempt to hide their dislike. Both they and her old friends felt she was too good for me, and wondered why she would marry beneath herself. I was a good-looking dumbass according to her father. Nonetheless we were happy and loved each other more than anything. I was an only child and both of my parents had died in my late teens, so Jessica became my whole world. I found a job in construction, and Jessica got a very good job at a finance company owned by a friend of her father's. When the recession hit in 2008 I lost my job, and it was Jessica's salary that pulled us through the bad times. This only succeeded in making her parents loathe me more, if that was possible. It did put a strain on our marriage. Well, I guess it would when the people you love and socialize with are telling you that your husband is a loser. Sadly, it also affected my friendships back home in the Bronx. I was now moving in different circles according to them. Of course my best friend Joey was always there for me. He was more like my brother, and his folks helped me through the loss of my own parents. It was Jessica that managed to convince me to take the job at the utility company. Like I said, I hated it. Indoors, computers, talking to people on the phone in a fake voice. It was my idea of hell, but I made the effort for Jessica and for us. We both hoped to have children one day, but having a successful career and being seen to have one was more important to Jessica. Image, wealth and status really did not bother me, but I did everything Jessica wanted, and I even tried to become the person Jessica wanted me to be. Sadly, when you stop being yourself things tend to go downhill, and you eventually become an unhappy person. I was no longer the chirpy Bronx builder who loved to have fun and be around people. I became depressed most days. I put on weight, stopped grooming and rarely socialized, if ever. Yes, I was an overweight office worker married to a successful financial analyst who attended fancy dinners and cocktail parties with the Albany elite. I was not one of them, they knew and I knew it. I pulled into our driveway and was surprised to see Jessica's car in the garage. I got out of the car and walked over to the house with a feeling of impending dread. I did not know why, but as I entered the kitchen Jessica was sat at the table looking solemn yet assured. There were some papers in front of her and as I was about to speak she cut me off. "Mikey, we need to talk." Those famous words hit me like a ton of bricks. I could see she was slightly nervous, but as I sat down I saw no tears. "What is it, babe?" I asked. "Everything okay?" She steeled herself, cleared her throat as though preparing for a big speech. "I am sorry, Michael, but I want a divorce," she stated clearly and calmly. My heart sunk and my stomach knotted. I was speechless as it felt like someone had reached into my chest and grabbed my heart. That horrible feeling of sudden loss that I have experienced twice before is the worst feeling you can ever imagine. It travels through your body like a virus. I looked at her and with a tremble in my voice managed to speak. "But why?" I stuttered. "I have fallen in love with somebody else," she said, looking at me with no sign of pity. I was shattered, but strangely I did not feel shocked. The old Mikey Green would have caused havoc, but he no longer existed. Jessica had seen to that. I was a shell of the man I used to be, and here she was finishing me off with a final swipe of the sword. How long? I said huskily. 4 months, she said as I just stared at her. But now I want us to be together and get married, she declared with no thought for my feelings. I was looking at a woman I no longer recognized, and in reflection she was looking at a man she no longer recognized. I don't want to know the details, but I do want to know why, I said finally, afraid of what her answer may be. She wasted no time in answering. Just look at yourself, Mikey. You are not the man I married. You were overweight, unshaven for years, and when was the last time you had a decent haircut or purchased new clothes, she said in a flurry of what must have been long pent-up feelings. You are a shell of that man I fell in love with, and let's be honest, you have never been on my intellectual level, have you? She said in a mocking tone. God knows how many times in the last decade I have had to defend you to my parents, friends and colleagues. Justify to them why we married in the first place, she continued as I suddenly wondered where the girl I fell in love with had disappeared to, and who this heartless creature was sitting before me. And rich, I mean my new man is younger than you, fit, attractive and has a successful business, and a big house close to mommy and daddy in Loudonville. Every new word she spoke felt like a dagger piercing my body. Do I know him? I asked meekly. He runs the gardening company that operates in the neighborhood. He is a sole trader at the moment, but we want to expand the business together, she added as I remained silent. She had finally finished and just sat there anticipating another question, no doubt so she could crush me further. When I remained silent, she slid the papers towards me. Daddy and his attorney helped me to draft our divorce papers. I think it is a good deal for you. Seeing as I paid the majority of the mortgage, Daddy recommended a 70-30 split in my favor for the house, which we can sell as I will be moving in with Rich. I just looked at her, and she continued. I think a 50-50 split of our savings is only fair, and I will require no alimony, although I am sure I could fight for something if I wanted to. The arrogance and spite in her voice was now clear to me. How did I miss it all these years? I felt like a fool, and I guess she thought I always was one. Come on, let's be honest, Mikey, I make way more than you do, and my new man makes plenty too, so I won't touch your 401k if you sign the papers, and don't fight me for anything. She suddenly stopped speaking as I looked her dead in the eye. She must have seen a glimmer of the old Mikey because she swallowed hard. I grabbed a pen and signed away 12 years of marriage. I rose from the table and went to our bedroom and packed up my possessions and then returned. She was sat at the table reading through the paperwork as I walked past her, through the door and out of her life. She said, "What?" Joey screamed. "Is she fucking crazy? To me, Joey is my family, and sadly over the last few years I have neglected him. But as true brothers we can see past any transgressions, and will always be there for each other in our time of need." As we spoke about what had happened, I could hear someone in the background and Joey trying to silence them. "Is that Helen?" I asked. "What is she saying?" "Yeah, Mikey," she said. "Good riddance to the stuck-up bitch." Joey and Helen had what you call no filter. What you see is what you get, and boy did I miss that. It is how I used to be. "Hey Mikey, I have a guy who Helen knows who does these investigations on debtors for local companies. I can get him to take a look into this guy for you. You know, see if the asshole is legit and all," he asked in his usual boorish manner. "I don't really care, buddy," I said despondently. "This guy screws you over, steals your wife, and you just sit back and take it. Fuck Mikey, she really has turned you into a cuck pussy," he said with his voice rising. Fuck, that hurt, and Joey must have realized it too. "Sorry bro, I am just as mad as hell, and I wish you were too," he said apologetically. "It's okay Joey. I mean, you are right and all. Do what you like," I said. I gave him the very few details I had on this new guy. He was the gardener for the neighborhood, so it wasn't too hard to get some more information if Helen's guy wanted it. "You need to get your head back in the game, Mikey, and return to your old self again," he instructed before we eventually hung up. After I put the phone down, I lay back on the cheap motel bed and stared at the ceiling fan whirring above. My head was spinning, and I tried to make sense of everything that had happened to my life, not only the last few hours but the last 12 years. Sleep evaded me, so I made a grab for the bottle of Jack Daniels on the table, and drank straight from the bottle. For the next few weeks I did the same. Often I would call in sick at work, or turn up drunk and smell of booze, leading me to be sent home. Everyone in the office was looking at me, snide comments made behind my back, and I felt like I was watching myself from above, just going through the motions of existing. I was recommended to a doctor, and although that helped, being signed off work gave me more time to think and dwell on the past. I never made it to the offices of Jones and Brown to finalize the divorce. A letter was sent to my office because nobody knew where I was, and nobody was going to bother looking. I knew that for sure. The letter contained the divorce settlement and a check for $175,000. This was my share of the house, savings and house contents. The settlement declared everything Jessica said at the kitchen table, and as I had not attended the meeting, it was finalized in absentia. I had no idea if all of this was legal and above board, but I had no fight left in me. Not enough anyway for Jessica and her powerful inner circle. A month had now passed since Jessica told me she wanted a divorce, and I had finally cashed the check into my account. I discovered all our other accounts had been closed, and Jessica had removed her name from our joint account. However, I was walking aimlessly out of the bank when I heard a voice calling my name. I ignored it at first, but when I eventually turned to look, I saw Pete and Shelley, my old neighbors. "Hey Michael," Pete asked, walking up to me. "Sorry to hear about the divorce," he said nervously. Now Shelley, his wife, she was a nosy neighbor and loved to gossip, and it did not take her long to pipe up. "I can't believe Jessica would leave you and remarry so quickly." I looked at her surprised. I seemed to remember Jessica saying she wanted to marry the guy, but such was my state of mind at the time I forgot about it. "Oh, you didn't know?" Shelley continued. "I had no idea," I said with an air of indifference. "We thought you guys were the real deal," Peter said. "Then we see she is married to this Richard Walton." It was the first time I had heard his full name. But as I looked at Shelley, she seemed to recoil and cringe at the mere mention of his name. I ignored it as I suddenly thought I now had his surname to give to Joey's friend, rather than Rich the gardener from Albany. "He was the gardener who services your neighborhood," I said, offering information not asked for. As I did, I saw Peter swing around and face Shelley, who by now had turned bright red. "A gardener," he said, yelling at Shelley and drawing stares from passers-by. "Why have you gone red, Shells?" he asked as I realized I had put my foot right in it. "No, Peter, no, never," Shelley pleaded. "He tried it on with me once, and I put him in his place." Peter was now red himself, and looking pretty irate as Shelley continued. "He is a sleaze, and every time he is due I go out for a few hours to avoid him." "I never told you because I knew you would be angry," she said, reaching for his hand and pleading with him. "We need to talk," he said before turning to me and apologizing. He grabbed her by the hand and marched her off down the sidewalk. I guess that is one lost customer for Jessica and Richard's growing empire, I thought to myself, and managing to raise a smile for the first time in a while. The news of the marriage did hit me hard. I slumped back into a depression and reached for the bottle again. I thought I would have a good try at drinking myself to death. That way all the pain would go, and I wouldn't have to continue with my pointless existence. The next morning I rose from my motel bed and fell to the floor, vomiting all over myself. I had officially hit rock bottom. I crawled into the shower on my hands and knees and let the cold water rain down on me. As I emerged, I looked in the mirror, and what I saw reflecting back left me shocked. "Fuck you," I shouted at the man looking back at me. "I need to get better." I fell to my knees and cried for the first time since my mother passed away. "I just want to be happy," I screamed into my hands. I knew something had to change. I walked into my office the following Monday and got down to some work. For some reason my personal mail was on my desk. I guessed it was redirected there because nobody knew where I was living. As I read through what was mainly junk, I found a flyer for a local gym, promising to get anybody in shape in 12 weeks. I snorted to myself, thinking it would take longer than that. But I thought, what the hell, maybe this was the change I needed. That evening as I entered the gym, I had no idea what the beautiful young instructor standing before me would think of this soul has been. At 38 I felt like an 80-year-old man, but as I stepped closer to her, she held out her dainty hand, which I gladly accepted. "I'm Jasmine," she said. To say she thought I was a mess would have been an understatement. But within her beautiful brown eyes I saw a semblance of hope for me. They seemed to inject some energy into me. Not lust or anything romantic, but honesty and compassion. So over the next week I had managed to move out of the motel and sign a lease on a small studio apartment in the city and close to the gym. I decided to focus on my 12-week plan and see where life took me. I needed to lose around 50 pounds, and the best place to start was getting rid of all the unopened alcohol bottles amongst my belongings. I worked really hard over the following month. My life was nothing but work and the gym. Joey and Helen also managed to visit a few times, no doubt to check up on me more than anything, but by the end of the month, and with constant encouragement from Jasmine, I had already lost 14 pounds. The good thing about spending nearly every day in the gym was that I got to know Jasmine a lot better. She agreed to coffee one evening after my session, and I found out a bit about her life. She was raised by a single mother, and she was attending a community college to become a full-time fitness coach and nutritionist. She certainly knew her stuff, and I warmed to her even more. I told her about my recent divorce and my old life in the Bronx. I admitted to her that I hit rock bottom before signing up at the gym and meeting her. I tried my best not to come off as some desperate creep, but she was beyond her years in terms of compassion and emotional maturity. It wasn't until a few sessions later that I emerged from the showers and met her. I was blown away. Jasmine was talking to a woman who at first sight looked like her sister. Corny, I know, but it is the truth. Jasmine saw me looking and walked over to me before I could turn and walk away. "Michael, this is my mum Rachel," she said, smiling as Rachel held out her hand. Our eyes met and I felt a tide of embarrassment flood over me. My stomach knotted and I was truly lost for words. The silence was now getting awkward. "It means he likes you, Mum," Jasmine said, laughing and saving me in the process. "He is quiet when he likes someone," she added, as though she had known me my whole life. The truth is, I wasn't always a quiet, shy and unassuming man. The years of what I now think to be emotional abuse will do that to you. Jasmine left us to collect her things as Rachel and I started to talk. When Jasmine returned, she invited me across the road for dinner. I hesitated at first, but her insistence made it hard to say no. I imagined that if she had a father, she would have him wrapped around her little finger. At dinner, Rachel was so warm and sweet. I could tell the apple did not fall far from the tree, and as the evening progressed, I relaxed in their company. With them there was no need to put on a show or act in a pretentious manner. They were not people who thought they were better than anyone. Rachel joked around a lot and it put me at ease. We did touch briefly on our past, and I guess Jasmine filled her mother in on my life. I left that night feeling better than I had in months, even years. I even had Rachel's number in my phone after she agreed to, or shall I say insisted on, finally sorting out the mess on top of my head. I was reluctant at first, but as Rachel was a hairstylist, I capitulated. That brought the sweetest laugh I have ever heard from a woman. The next couple of months Rachel and I were inseparable. When we finally made love, the passion was intense and loving, and it felt perfect every single time. From then on I only had her in my mind, and finally my heart was beating for another woman. I knew we had to take it slow because I did not want her to think she was some kind of rebound from Jessica. We wanted to make sure our feelings for each other were real. We had both been wronged in our lives, and so trust was very important to us both. Eventually I took her back to my hometown where Joey and Helen fell in love with her immediately. Helen pulled me aside one evening in the kitchen and said, "Now this is the woman for you, Mikey. Do not let her go." I assured her there was no chance of that. "Really? I do not believe you." 180 pounds, really?" I said excitedly. "Yep, 180 exactly," Jasmine confirmed. "You are back to your ideal weight, Dad," she said, laughing at her new name for me. I was so proud of myself and so grateful to Jasmine and Rachel for helping me get to this point. My new haircut, along with the surrender of my beard, must have contributed to some of that weight loss, I thought. Rachel had convinced me to try a clean-shaven look once so she could see my face. I had to laugh at that suggestion. I just hoped she wouldn't be put off by the man behind the mask. Thankfully she wasn't. So here I was on cloud 9. I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had achieved what I set out to do. I looked great and I felt great, and this was the type of mentality I had when I was on a construction site in New York. I made my way to Rachel's house feeling on top of the world. I walked through the door to be met by a nervous and pale-looking Rachel. The look of worry on her face gave me a feeling of déjà vu. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked nervously. I had that bad feeling again. "We need to talk," she said. Suddenly I felt like the walls were closing in on me. Those familiar feelings came back and the nausea attacked my senses. "Okay," I said as Rachel took my hand and sat me down. "Look, Rachel, if you are going to break up with me, just do it quickly so I can get out of here," I said abruptly, as she recoiled in shock. "No, honey," she replied, gripping my hand tighter and pulling me slightly closer. "I do not know how to say this because I don't want you to get mad at me." My feelings of dread had not abated. "I am pregnant," she announced hesitantly. I was in shock. We remained silent for a few seconds as her beautiful face creased up, trying to gauge my reaction. I rose to my feet and walked a few steps away. I turned back to her looking worried and on the verge of tears. "Yes," I screamed at the top of my lungs while simultaneously jumping in the air with both fists raised. Her face lightened up and joy sprang back into her eyes. "You are not mad?" she asked, regaining her beautiful smile. "How could I be mad? I am going to be a daddy," I announced before taking her into my arms and kissing her passionately on the lips. We embraced each other for the next 5 minutes. I was the happiest man on earth. Over the next few days, Rachel, Jasmine and I started to look for a house. Even though Rachel had very little in terms of savings, I had nearly $180,000 in the bank, which was more than enough to buy a house outright. It took less than a week to find a beautiful 5-bed colonial in Pine Hills. It needed some renovation work which put off other buyers, but with my construction experience, I was excited about its potential. Our offer was accepted, and it meant we did not need to take out a mortgage. The day we moved into our new home, I got down on one knee and proposed to Rachel. I knew it was fast, but I loved her so much, and she was the one for me. She accepted, and I would love to say that from there we lived happily ever after, but that would skip over the reason I am sat here in this courthouse. Just to make it clear, I was not being charged with anything. Well, a couple of weeks after moving into our new home, I had a phone call from Joey. It was earth-shattering to say the least. I had actually forgotten all about Joey asking Helen's colleague to look into my ex-wife's new husband, and to be honest, Joey did too. If this had been going on for months, I had no idea what it was going to cost me, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't even care to know what he had found out. Nonetheless, Joey was beside himself with glee, and just had to tell me his findings. I remained silent as Joey began to speak. "The whole thing is a house of cards, Mikey," he said, laughing. "Helen's guy dug around, and after you gave us the full name, it set the wheels in motion. It turns out the IRS and the feds got involved." "Hold on," what I yelled, thinking I had missed a major chunk of the story. "What do you mean the feds are involved?" "Just listen, Mikey, just you listen to this," he said, trying to calm me down. "The guarding company he owns has Jessica listed as a director, and it is in debt, Mikey. I mean serious debt, and that is just for starters. The house he owns now has Jessica's name on the deeds, and it is worth over $1 million, but the mortgage payments are made through a company called Ritual Enterprises. That company owns the house and the business. Jessica and Richard are listed as joint co-owners, and it began trading only 6 months ago, probably just after their wedding." I was trying my best to keep up, and I knew Joey was doing his best to relay what Helen had obviously told him. Helen's guy alerted the IRS, who by the way will be picking up his tab. I was pleased to hear I wasn't going to be stumped for a huge bill. Anyway, the IRS investigated Richard Walton and found out he is on their wanted list. They had a picture of him or something. "So he is a fraudster," I said, stating the obvious. "Oh yeah, Mikey, but wait until you hear what happened next," he said, teasing me. "Well, this investigation alerted the attention of some big corporate type in Charlotte, North Carolina." I interjected. "Yeah," Joey said excitedly. "Well, his name is Davis Nolan, and he has a daughter called Julia Reed. She is currently estranged from her husband Kyle Reed. They have 2 kids together, and..." "Okay, by now," I was seriously confused. "Get on with it, Joey," I said, exasperated. "Stick with me, kid," he said breathlessly. "Well, it turns out Kyle Reed is Richard Walton." What I screamed down the phone, and Joey's ear must have been ringing. Not that he would have cared, he was too busy laughing his ass off. "Yeah, and they are still legally married. I think he is called a bigamist or something, but that is not the best of it," he said, leaving me hanging for more. This was beginning to sound like a Hollywood movie or something. Well, the FBI got involved, and it turns out the guy is a 2-time felon. He has spent time inside, drugs and burglary, I think. Mr. Nolan managed to get him a reduced sentence for the second conviction. He is a powerful man apparently. Anyways, the feds investigated him, and this Kyle Richard guy made contact with another suspect they were looking into regarding drug trafficking crimes. My mind drifted back towards Jessica and her friends and family. I could just picture their faces at this news. I started to smile. "There is more, Mikey. The FBI and the IRS joined forces and took this guy down. They found him at a storage unit not far from his home, and the answer to how a man in debt could afford $1 million house and a lavish lifestyle became all too clear." "How, Joey, how?" I was hooked. "They found heroin, ecstasy and stolen goods in his unit and his truck. They actually think he was about to flee again. He had suitcases filled with clothes and stuff in his truck." I started to laugh, and Rachel joined me on the sofa, shaking her head and laughing too. She had no idea what she was laughing at or what was making me so happy. "So what about Jessica?" I asked, and Rachel swung around and glared at me. I put my hand over the receiver and whispered to her. "You are not going to believe this," I said, shaking my head and leaving her hanging. Joey continued to speak as I returned the receiver to my ear. She was arrested. Her parents have somehow managed to keep it out of the media, but I expect over the next few days they will be front-page news. "It is a big news story after all," he said. I actually think Joey was more excited than I was because quite honestly any feelings I had for Jessica, ill or otherwise, were gone. I reached for Rachel's hand and held it just to confirm that fact. After I ended the call, I turned to Rachel with eager anticipation and told her everything. She was shocked and surprised because even though she knew Jessica was a complete bitch, it never dawned on her that she could be a criminal. All I could think of was what her parents, family and the so-called social elites thought of her. Poor old daddy had a duped criminal for a daughter, and that cannot go down too well at the country club. I had to laugh to myself, and Rachel knew what I was thinking and laughed along with me. A few days later, the front page of every newspaper in the area and every media news channel was covering this story. I guess Jessica's parents still had some leverage in the community because she barely got a mention. Of course, the bigamist, drug trafficking con man was splashed all over our screens, but the female accomplice who moved in elite social circles and was well known in the corporate financial world was not named. However, less than a week passed before one newspaper published the mugshot picture of them both, complete with prisoner numbers, but no mention of Jessica by name. We did find out that Kyle Reed was actually 41, and not 35 as he claimed to be. So my ex-wife actually left me for an older criminal who has just destroyed her life. Maybe she wasn't as intelligent as she thought. I was actually shocked at the image of my ex-wife. I had to take a few looks just to recognize her. She looked a shadow of the confident and arrogant woman who dumped me nearly 8 months ago. She was gaunt and looked as though she had aged, her hair was thinner, and she had huge dark bags under her eyes. I looked up to see my beautiful pregnant fiancée who looked the complete opposite. I felt like the luckiest man alive. Not only to have her but to also be shot of my ex and her family. In the months that followed, the whole issue died down. We enjoyed our first family Christmas in the new house. Rachel's parents came to stay with us, Helen and Joey stopped by, and I was surprised to see a few of my old friends from my construction days get back in touch. They loved Rachel too, and it was they who talked me into getting back into the construction game. Rachel and Jasmine agreed with them, and that's another reason I love them. In the new year I quit my job and became a self-employed tradesman. I was working on construction sites but also doing small jobs in the community. Ironically, I also started to get a lot of requests to do gardening work in quite a few neighborhoods. I was even surprised to be contacted by Peter and Shelley, but only if I promised not to try anything on with Shelley. They had my word. In March, Rachel gave birth to our mixed twins Alex and Sophia. In April, we were married in a small ceremony in Albany. It had been just over a year since the divorce from Jessica, and to think how much has happened in that time is astonishing. However, sadly, it would not be the last I would see of her. My new perfect life had been going so well until a visitor came knocking on my door completely out of the blue. His name was Andrew Brown of the law firm Jones and Brown, who was defending Ms. Jessica Walker in her upcoming court case. I was surprised she had gone back to her maiden name. Surely mommy and daddy wouldn't like the good Walker name dragged through the proverbial mud. Mr. Brown made himself comfortable in my house as he spoke. "We would like you to provide a good character testimony for Ms. Walker," he asked forthrightly. I laughed. "Why would I do that?" I replied. "Well, before your divorce you knew Ms. Walker better than anyone. You know she is straight, and would never get involved in anything criminal, right?" I don't know if he was asking or telling me. But even I could see where he was going with this. "What if he refuses?" a voice behind me suddenly asked. Rachel emerged from down the stairs, obviously listening in to our conversation. Mr. Brown looked at me. "What my wife said," I proffered. "Well, we can get a subpoena and force you to attend. If you still fail to show up, we can have you charged and thrown in jail," he said with a now menacing tone. My first reaction was to smash him in the face and throw him headfirst through the door. But as I looked towards my wife, I realized I had too much to lose. I had no idea if what he said was right or even legal, but for one court appearance, I acquiesced to his demands. It was just easier. So here I am, sat in the waiting room of the courthouse. The trial has been going on for a couple of days, and as my appearance neared, I turned to Rachel. "What do I say, honey?" I asked with a whisper. She took my hand and looked at me with those beautiful brown eyes and said, "You are the most honest and loving man I have ever known. Just be honest." I knew that what I said in that court would probably have no bearing on the case at all. I had been strong-armed into attending by my ex-wife's legal team. They had wrongly made the assumption that I would speak highly of her. It could be the biggest mistake they had ever made because I was going to do no such thing. A few days ago the trial for Kyle Reed had concluded. He was found guilty of Class C bigamy, a federal charge of Schedule I, drug possession with intent to supply, perjury, handling stolen property, and a whole range of charges relating to defrauding the US government. He was also on a third strike. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison. Even I was shocked by that sentence. However, in an attempt to get a lesser sentence, he implicated Jessica on the fraud and handling stolen goods charges. He claimed she was in on it as they started the holding company as soon as they were married. What is it they say about no honor amongst thieves? The stolen property charges were being contested, but on fraud the IRS had it all ends up. "Mr. Green, we are ready for you," the bailiff declared. I rose to my feet and exhaled loudly. Rachel had left to join the public gallery, whilst Jasmine looked after the twins in the waiting room. They were sound asleep, oblivious to it all. In the court my name was announced, and as I approached the stand, I could feel the eyes of the entire court on me. It was a strange atmosphere. There were a few gasps as I took the stand, especially from those sat behind the defendant. As I took the oath I turned to face the room, and it was the first time in over a year that I had seen Jessica in the flesh. She was dressed in an orange prison uniform and surrounded on either side by an expensively put-together defense team. She was looking down at her feet, but I made eye contact with her parents and then a few of her friends who sat behind her. I made out a couple of people who looked at me and mouthed the word "wow." The irony of me now looking down on them from the witness stand was not lost on me. I spent our entire marriage with them all looking down on me. Now the roles have been reversed. Andrew Brown rose to his feet and began to speak. "Thank you for coming today, Mr. Green," he said. "Well, I wasn't given much choice, was I, Mr. Brown?" I replied, staring down at him. He recoiled at my tone, and all eyes turned towards him to see what his reply would be. At that moment Jessica finally lifted her head and looked in my direction. Her eyes flew wide open and her jaw dropped. She suddenly burst into tears, causing everyone to turn and look. The realization must have hit her. The man she fell in love with had made a welcome return, and the man she had destroyed was gone. She was now inconsolable as the judge asked her lawyer if he needed to take a minute. He ignored his offer and continued. "Mr. Green is the defendant's ex-husband, who was admittedly treated very well by my client in the divorce. Would you agree that the charges against her surprise even you?" He asked. No objections from the prosecutor. I was very shocked. "But as to being treated well in the divorce, I guess you and I have different ideas on that," I replied confidently as murmurs appeared from behind him. I am sure I could see Jessica's parents talking to one of the team as Jessica continued sobbing. "Okay, Mr. Green, but would you say that in all the time you and the defendant were together, she was always an honest, hardworking and law-abiding citizen?" he asked. "Well, she was cheating on me for 4 months with a man she described as younger, more attractive and successful, so once again we probably have our own definitions of honesty," I replied. I was beginning to think at that point her legal team realized they may have made an error here. Remember, he only threatened me to turn up, not paint a picture of a perfect innocent woman. I was just being honest like Rachel said I should be. "But would you agree that in that time you neglected yourself physically and intellectually, so when someone better came along could you really blame the defendant for moving on?" he said tersely. There was an almost universal chorus of disapproving moans from the public gallery and the prosecution bench, who obviously felt that at this point they were not really needed. The defense were digging my ex-wife's grave. The judge brought about order, giving me a chance to think about my reply. I agree that I neglected aspects of my life. It was very hard to live with someone who controlled my life, and whose family and friends considered you beneath them. The defendant's father once referred to me as a good-looking dumbass, I said openly, and the look of shock and confusion amongst the defense was almost too hilarious for words. At this point Jessica was just staring at me with pity in her eyes. I had none for her in return. "That may well be, Mr. Green, but there is nothing to suggest that the defendant was ever involved in criminal activity. No evidence to suggest that for the years you were together, that she was dishonest or looking to commit fraud. She paid her bills, even yours for a while, and never broke the law. Is that right?" he said, now visibly flustered. "Objection." The prosecutor rose to her feet. "This is inadmissible, Your Honor. The witness is not here to prove the defendant committed no crime. It is a waste of the court's time." Sustained, the judge said. "The defense can rephrase the question." Mr. Brown looked perplexed, but cleared his throat and resumed his line of questioning. Mr. Green, in the years you were together, the defendant was an honest person who paid all her bills, her taxes and her mortgage. She even paid yours for a time, is that correct? He stated. Yes, I said, but I have no idea what type of person she has been over the last year. Well, I think we can take a guess, I said. Objection, Mr. Brown said, looking at the judge. What do you mean objection, Mr. Brown? He is your character witness, the judge said, trying not to laugh as half the courtroom burst into laughter. The jury had to look away. Your Honor, he is obviously a bitter ex-husband seeking revenge on the woman who dumped him and moved on, he said, now getting angry and irate. The defense team were now beside themselves with worry. Jessica was looking back between her parents and her counsel with tears running down her face. The judge spoke again. If he is a bitter ex-husband, then why did you put him on this stand? The prosecution team just sat back and smiled to one another. Is it true that you are indeed a bitter man who just wants to see his ex-wife suffer? Mr. Brown asked after a period of silence. If this had happened 11 months ago, you may have had a point. But now I have nothing to be bitter about. I may not be an intelligent man, Your Honor, but I am an honest man. Please, Mr. Green. Your wife? Ex-wife, Mr. Brown, I interjected. Okay, your ex-wife leaves you for another man, and you feel no bitterness or ill will towards her and her family? He probed. No. Like I said, 11 months ago maybe you could have implied that. But since then I have found the most beautiful woman in the world, I said, looking over into the public gallery and straight at Rachel. People followed my gaze until all eyes were on her. She picked me up, put me back together, and now I get to call her my wife. She has given me 3 beautiful children. We have great friends, wonderful family, a beautiful home and a successful business. Who in the world would be bitter with all that? I stated, never breaking eye contact with my beautiful wife, the smile never leaving my lips. She just looked back at me with that radiant smile, nodding her head. I turned back to see the defense looking tense, and now Jessica's parents were looking down at their hands. Jessica looked distraught and was sobbing as she caught my eye. I mouthed the words thank you to her and she collapsed into her arms onto the table. I was dismissed and I returned to my family. As I walked through the door I could hear a big commotion with Jessica at the center of it. She was screaming, sorry, I love you, but whether or not it was aimed at me, I do not know, and frankly, I did not care. Jessica was found guilty of conspiracy to commit an offense to defraud the US government. I guess the court felt Kyle Reed was not smart enough to do it alone. I read it was titles 18 to 371, 26 to 7201, and 7206, 1 and 2. I had no idea what that meant. She was also found guilty of 5th-degree possession of stolen goods, which was a Class A misdemeanor apparently. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison. It also meant any chance of continuing her career in finance upon her eventual release was gone forever. For us, life is pretty great. The twins are getting bigger each day, and their smiles can lift the clouds on even the darkest day, which I am pleased to say are few and far between. My business is booming, and even Rachel now has a few clients that visit our home for hair and beauty treatments. Jasmine is breezing through her final year of college, which I am now paying for, by the way. Well, it is the least I could do for her. She did save my life, remember? The end. Thank you for listening this story. As usual, drop a like and subscribe my channel. Love you all.